right, guys. Looks like we're all here. You can get yourself all set. I got Robert coming in. He's going to be talking about the upcoming geology tour just for a little bit before the show really starts here. But I just wanted to get everyone introduced. It looks like we have a full house today. We got Gareth, Tanvir, Rick, Sean, Buddy, Mike, Jim, Chris, and Robert. Good. I didn't screw anything up. Yes. How's it going, guys?
Yeah, not so bad, thank you. And yourself?
Not too bad at all. I'm hoping this is actually coming across well on the screen there. It looks like it is. Yep. Perfect. All right. Big claps for everyone.
Well, big claps for you, Neil, because I saw that video that you put together, and it's fabulous. I love it.
Oh,
it's good job. Yeah, great job, man.
Well, actually, Robert was there for it too. I think a few of you were there, but yeah,
it just turned out really well.
The way you did it was a little different. It turned out great.
Well, thank you. I actually edited the crap out of it, though. I had a lot of ums and ahs in my main presentation when we were doing it live. That's one of the problems with when you're doing it off the hip, I guess. But thank you. I was actually very proud of it. So it looks like it went live to the preview for me, but I have to sort of like hit another button now because I have this extra YouTube thing put in. But I think the stream will still have the whole recording. I think. Fingers crossed, because there's no sense starting it again. Happy Sunday, yes. I just went through a hurricane, and now the sun's out. So
that's a nice change of pace for you, I bet.
Well, I don't usually get hurricanes, no. But I live in a sort of a concrete building, so I wasn't concerned about anything like that. But yeah, it was just basically really rainy.
We are live, by the way. I got the notification on my phone and YouTube.
Oh, yes. I was just saying that's the weird thing that happened where I'm sitting there watching it come up on this preview, because now YouTube has this preview thing that they do, so I can see a preview before I hit go live. I'm just hoping that it actually saved the whole thing, including the preview. Because, you know, it would suck otherwise to have the front part cut off. I can just re-upload it, I guess, but you know, I wanted to do it without doing that. Yeah. I suppose I could shut it down, start again, but that's no. That's just a little too much. I'm fine. I'll
Anybody here got a degree in audio video tech?
Huh?
Anybody here got a degree in audio video tech?
Actually, kind of me.
I meant like media, like, you know, being all the grips and stuff, how the studios work.
Oh, that
hero itself.
No, I don't have that degree. No.
That's why it's live and learn.
There you go. That's why it's live and learn. So I'm going to let the intro start for the second part here. I'm the preview thing, so I have it all done up, and then Robert, we're going to talk about your upcoming tour. And then we're going to take questions from the audience. So see how it goes from there. But I want to hear where we're going to be going. And obviously, Mount Olympus is, you said this is right behind your house, right? I guess he took off, but yes. Okay. All right, let's see if I can make this happen real nice-like.
Sorry, I was muted so I could kick my dog out of the room. He was
Totally understandable. All right, let's see if we can make this 40-second intro thing work great, too. We can make it go smoother, that'd be even smoother, but yeah, one thing at a time. See if we can do this. Welcome to the September 8th edition of The Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we are doing a special event where we're going to take a few questions on Discord or in the video chat itself regarding the electric universe plasma cosmology theories and answer them to the best of our ability. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and all that other wonderful stuff. All right, and it looks like we're back and nothing exploded. So Robert, tell us what's going on here, as long as you're done kicking your dog, of course.
Oh, with the Mount Olympus site?
Well, no, we were going on your tour. I guess
okay. Well,
the one I can't
tour.
Go on that I really want to go on.
Yeah, sorry. I was really hoping to see you again. It was been really cool.
Well, one thing at a time. I got to go to Bath, so we can't argue with that.
Yes,
that was worth it in the symposium, and I still have more stuff to show everyone, by the way. We're not quite done with all that footage.
And you did rep the show very well, so thank you for that.
Oh my God, it was fantastic. It was just great. They were good people, and we managed to get some bonds created. All the things I was worried about were nothing I had to worry about. Just as I told people here, I said, no, these people are still my friends. I know them. And I went there. We were still friends. They knew me. It was all exactly as it should be. And because that's really what this is about, is when you know people and you're honest with them, you're going to really come out with a better approach to things. And I guess that's why we're all here, right?
Yeah.
Let's explore the world then. So where are you heading on your trip there, Robert?
So we're
who's going? It's Andy and
Rob. Wednesday. Yes, we are going to have Andy Hall, Bruce Laybourne, Andy Fitz, Larry White, my friend Dusty Oberg, who's going to be taking us through 9 Mile Canyon.
Super.
And he's a guy, he's really familiar with that area, and with the weather being so shoddy with the past couple of days, if there's any kind of weather at all, we're going to get out of there quick, because you can get belly washers in this place. So that's why I'm bringing a guide with me on this one. And but we're going to basically check out, like I said, 9 Mile Canyon, and then up around this. If you look at this map here, on the right upper right corner is Duchesne, just kind of where I live, and then there's another town off to the west. It's called Vernal, and that's where Dinosaur National Monument is. You've been there with me, Bruce and I. And we're going to be just basically cycling around from Duchesne, just making a big loop, cutting down through Colorado, down into where the Black Dragon Canyon is, and that kind of like carries over into Utah. And then we'll just be looping back over to the Capitol Reef, and then coming back up through this Indian Canyon here, and just making a really big loop from the Utah, Colorado area for just the Colorado Plateau. And we're going to be covering a few sites.
That's simply amazing.
Yeah. So basically, we're going to be covering petroglyphs, the formations, slick rocks, looking for a lot of chevrons. We're going to be covering a lot of fossil areas. We're going to try to get down the river tour in a dinosaur monument and go down through the Split Mountain, because they have petroglyphs there. And then, that whole area is just worth checking out.
Oh, get some shots. Yeah.
Right.
I know Fitz will anyway.
All the footage I can.
Encourage Andy Fitz to do some interviews. I began to realize he has a lot of camera equipment though. But we did some that year with. We went to, it was I guess 2017, where we went to the Red Mountain. We were talking about that. But like, in case anyone doesn't know, Andrew Fitz runs Planet Amnesia. He's really big on the Velikovsky side of things. He really wants to, he's really into psychology, and he really is very interested in what happened to the minds of people as they went through this type of thing. Why we can remember it, but quite can't remember it consciously. It's burned into our subconscious, as it were. So that's his focus. Obviously, the daily plasma is Andy's. And Bruce Laybourne works with, I'm not sure his association. He's a geologist, though. So
yes, he's affiliated with the Institute for Advanced Studies for Climate Change, the IASCC.org, and also he is a corporate officer, I guess, or something of the institute. I don't want to say CEO or president, because I can't remember the exact title, but it's for the International National Earthquake and Volcanic Prediction Center. I believe that's the name. He's also an officer of that institution, and he's was a cartographer, an underwater cartographer for the Navy. That's where he got his credentials, and after being his degree in geophysics.
Yeah, I need better credentials, something like that.
So he was an underwater cartographer for the Navy, and then he like went off on his own and he started those two institutes. So yeah, so he's basically working into the magnetic anomalies and how they shape our weather patterns and climate.
I hope that and bring back to what Buddy said earlier. Thank you very much for your comment there about the quality of that. But I want to, you were there for the conversation. I cut you out, of course, Robert. Because as much as I would like it to be a conversation, when I realized at the end I was going to include all the questions at the end, because, I was like, well, this is good. I should just leave it like this. This is probably just going to be nice and clear, And I was quite happy with that. So I put that together and put some music on it. But when we were talking, I was mentioning about the formula and see how this makes sense, how this is just the same formula you'd use in a laboratory, no different than any other formula with regards to the distance of capacitor plates, I guess. But now that we're looking at the sun and seeing how blobs of plasma can move towards, like as they pass by the Earth, or high charges from the currents leaving the sun in these slow, wide type of motion of large amounts of charge, as opposed to speedy distance, like the solar wind being fast in some other places. Basically, you could see how that could press down on the ionosphere and thus induce currents under the Earth, causing earthquakes and all this other kind of thing. So the idea behind it is rooted in good science. It's just, well, as we were talking before, about how difficult it is to get astronomers to take seriously that a nice, safe, laminar flow type magnetohydrodynamics theory is not going to give you the answers you need, because it will not tell you when things are, like, it won't show you what it really does. They're using gradients as opposed to, like, they're basically ignoring the electric field and the way the electric field impacts this type of thing, which is much closer to a planet's surface. They have any astro body, they have a bigger effect. But this is where you're seeing this culmination, where you get the petroglyphs and the geology. This is why these tours are pretty much the bomb. This is what I want to. I would love to make this a big thing. Something we could do for everyone. Get everyone going.
Well, that's the game. That's why we started up the store. We want to get this kind of going and like create a demand for this, and spark people to come out to this area, because it's a great area to start learning electrical geology, and it's not too far from any of the highways. So you don't really have to venture off.
No, that's what I loved about it, because it didn't take long before we were gone. I mean, we were just over the hills and off. We couldn't even find the road. We knew where it was because how we got in here, but that was it. And it's impressive how you don't think that they're that tall, and of course we climbed a few, those chevrons and other things, and they're just massive.
And all that loose shell. I mean, it's just it's kind of dangerous too.
Well, that's another thing that was, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, you get right on top of them. You see it. You can see the fact that, like, this layer sort of came in a big pulse and welded to it, and then of course was cracked not shortly thereafter.
Right.
Anyway, still. Anyone, before we go any further, then anyone else want to ask Robert what we're going to what they're going to see? Because I don't want to be the only person talking to this poor gentleman. Or maybe I am. I don't know. Okay, I guess no one else wants to ask you any
Well,
questions.
well, hello. I'd like to throw in something there, if I might.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we see these nice straight lines down where you're at, but up in the Canadian Shield, we see a lot of massive deformation of these layering of the rock. And I think it has to do with a lot more energy being focused in certain areas where the rock is turning soft and being bubbled and manipulated by these tendrils of electricity that are coming down from the skies. The sprites, the red sprites that I think carved up the planet and created all of these um, electrical differences that basically turned people and animals into dust and piled them on the mountains.
Was there a
But we
question
see
in there?
we see a lot of the striations in there, and how come it's different up here than down here? I think I might have just answered the question myself. But Rob, you got an idea on that?
Well, I'd have to say, I'd kind of go along with what Neil said. Like whenever the energy is ripping through, and you say it's in the northern latitudes, whenever you get towards the poles, I guess the energy is distributed a little bit differently. So it's all possible, and I mean, plus there is evidence there that something happened. So
Maybe more concentrated energy in the
perhaps
northern area, in the
Well,
northern
that's where the
shield.
magnetic field poles would automatically confine electrons. The tumultuousness of the latitudes around plus and minus 30 to, plus and minus 45 or somewhere in that area, I'd say those are some pretty twisted areas. You can get it going in any direction there. But that's sort of like right along the equator where you don't get, air doesn't seem to mix from the north to south equator. I find that also fascinating. And it obviously should never happen. Like, why would the planet rotate in one direction, but air goes in different directions in both sides of the planet? Like, straight up, if they thought that that was not related to electricity, I have no idea what the hell they're thinking. Because that's the only thing that would explain that. Because otherwise, shouldn't they all go in the same direction? And then of course, when you look at Jupiter, you see them lines go literally, layers go in different directions, right beside each other. That's not, there's no amount of air that could describe that. Like there's no fluid dynamic process. I find getting down to it lacking understanding of just like, I mean, they recognize magnetic fields, but not electric, and that's
Well, yeah, I agree, Neil. I think those same processes that we see on the cloud layers of Jupiter and Saturn are the same thing that keeps our galaxy together, and no need for dark matter. If you put a massive Birkeland current into a Z-pinch, and it just holds everything together.
well, I guess we got to be sure what we're talking about when we say Z-pinch, but I know what you mean. Only because there's so many different types. That's all. Like, if you have a highly concentrated one, you can get those weird plasmoids and so forth. Or if you get a really dense one, you can make planets. So
Well, yeah, it all has to do with the available material in the area, in the general area, how much hydrogen.
let me go here and start sharing my screen.
good idea. I'm trying to stop.
Oh yeah, don't worry about it. I'll take care
Like
of
I
that.
said, I think my computer's decided to act up now.
That's
I can't even stop sharing. It just froze.
quite all right. I think I should grab it, and I should have it there. That should work. Now I can see them both, hopefully. Good, my screen. Yes. All right, problem solved.
Cool.
So, I'm just actually skipping ahead there. So, Rick, what happened with the, do we have any questions? Oh, we do have questions. Look at that. I guess, can you get Rasmath on to talk to you? Rick, are you alive? Are you dead? Don't be dead.
Is he even here still?
I don't know. Check for pulse. He's probably.
I mean, we could just read the question.
I know we could. That's, you know, but I kind of wanted to meet people.
He says, "Can I ask here?"
Oh yes, but I wanted to get him in the thing.
Yeah.
But I just don't know why
Okay.
Rick is. I assume Rick just took off for a sec, so that's fine.
Yeah. Let me know if I can help.
Actually, Rick's not even on here anymore. Or am I insane?
You're correct. He's not in Discord anymore.
Okay, he exploded. Yeah, and he logged off general chat, so he probably crashed. That's probably what happened. He's running a computer. They can do that. Well, since you're here then, Tim, how's it going? You can might as well say hi. We'll get to questions in a minute. Or you're muted, by the way, so you have to unmute yourself to talk. This will come much more naturally when people get used to that. You okay there, Tim? I'm assuming Tim's trying to talk because he just typed a second ago. Well, I guess everyone's exploding all over the place. Don't let me stop you. Someone else can talk now. Does anyone have any questions? Since
Robert,
I'm out of all the asking questions I possibly can. It's obviously going nowhere.
Hey, Robert,
Yes.
are you still on? I was
Yes.
checking out. I was looking at just perusing because that's what I do. Urara Symposium, September 26th through 30th at St. George.
I'm sorry?
Utah. There's a symposium happening on the 26th through the 30th this year at St. George, Utah. It's the organization is URARA, URARA, which is the Utah Rock Art Research Association. And they are looking for old photos, articles, tall tales, and all sorts of memorabilia to share on their 40th anniversary symposium. It says, do you know the status of other charter members and how to contact them? Please send any information. I wonder if this would be interesting to you. It's in your area and up your alley.
Actually, yeah, I would. I wasn't even aware of that. Thank you. I'll look into that.
Sir. I'll send you a little link, okay?
Yes, thank you, please.
Yeah, that's half the trouble. We don't know what's like all the stuff that's in our area. Plus, and we got to making contacts, especially in the area of geology, is difficult. So.
Oh yeah. Like there's a couple state groups that I do belong to, but I wasn't aware of that one. So you come across something new every day, basically.
So assuming that Rick exploded, and because he's not back yet, he might not even realize what happened. But we actually have a few people asking questions. So let's go over a few. Tim's was trying to type or trying to talk, but he,
Neil,
no one could hear you, Tim, at all. No.
Neil, I'm actually logging the questions in Notepad. So I have the 3 ones from the chat, and we have one from Discord. So
perfect.
Let me know if you want me to read them out, or
I just saw Kronos there asking questions, so I was like, okay, now I don't want to lose any. Ha!
No, so I got Rasmath in the general chat in Discord, then Chrome Air, then Kronos, then Dravo.
Perfect. All right.
So let me know.
Well, we'll see if Richard can or Rick can make it back then, and because I don't want to go anywhere without him.
Yeah, because the Discord's kind of his thing, ain't it?
Well, I just want, yeah. Well, you know, it's a thing, yeah. And I'd like for him to be happy, so because it's a good. He's probably just rebooting. So Tim, did you find out what happened to your mic? You might be. Are you muted like on your microphone lapel type of thing, or like a button, or is that what's going on there? Well, you're very welcome. We're definitely not going to fail your questions. So I just want to make sure we don't lose a track of them. And then obviously neither does Mike. So. Don't let me stop you all. Well, we should get to some questions because I really want to wait because, but if I don't like dead air, it sucks.
Let's just start with the Razmath ones since he started first. Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Go with first ones first, and we'll try to get some people who can. We're going to be taking questions in Discord once Rick gets back. That was our goal. I could hop in, I could listen, he could line you up, you know, type of thing. But he's not there right now, so. But we're definitely going to jump into the head of the questions. So go ahead there, Mike.
Let's do it.
Make it happen.
Oh, it's Chris actually. TakeBackSpace. I'm gonna. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
No worries. Just letting you know. Razmath from Discord is saying, question. I was reading the chat and looks like the electric view approaches the geological time in a fast pace, like from the start of life on Earth until today in 6 million years. As there are many ways to calculate the geological time, why you decided for the fastest. P.S. My opinion is that geological time can be fast and slow-paced. I consider strata a catastrophe mark on the Earth's crust, not a measure of time passing. How could this be right or wrong?
Oh, that's actually a really good question.
Do you want me to repeat any part of that? It's Razmath, R-A-S.
Oh, no, I see it right there. We're good.
Cool.
Good. I'm a multiple screen kind of guy. Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned it. There was a debate on that in several areas about how are things laid down.
Looks like Tim has joined us. Welcome, Tim.
Yeah, he just can't talk for some reason. That's the only problem. He's working on it, though. Where was I? Okay, I had a related content. It was in one of our playlists. There we go. I had a big discussion on it right down here. Now this is just one of two things. Yeah, it was this little part here that I saw, experiments in stratification, which I thought was really good. Now it's I think it's made by some biblical people, and I'm not really cool with that, generally speaking, because it sort of detracts from it because it automatically puts a Bible side to it. But you're right, with regards to the age of the Earth, I'm not sure how old it is. I know it's untold millions of years old, or if not billions. So that's straight up. I have no idea exactly how old it is. There's two prevailing ideas that if we could see that the decay rate of the electric field that affects, or the decay rates of the radioactive material that we used for this dating process are affected by electric fields, which it does seem to be the case. The only question becomes, how is it affected? Is it affected in a linear way, as if we've been losing charge over time, and therefore it is faster in the past than it is in the present? That's a possibility. This could change things like 65 million years. If it was by a factor of 1,000, it would be 65,000 years. So that's a possibility. Now, the other one, of course, is that we don't really know how it is affected, and we never will figure out, because there is no consistency with the way it was affected in the past. If that's the case, then we have almost no way of dating the only way we have to date is, well, we could date by symbols if we could put the symbols in the right order. We can date by general taxa, flora and fauna, and try to put them together in that way. And so we could have an order maybe. But as we know, lots of animals were probably just lifted up, ripped to pieces, and dropped down. Only perhaps maybe their bones in some places left. It's rare that we get the whole creature, but we sometimes have. So it is almost impossible to say. I'm comfortable with not knowing. But there are people who want to shoehorn things into timelines for other reasons. And I'm always skeptical of that because that's just another form of bias, right? So it's fair to say that we really do not know. I don't know if anyone else wants to answer anything on that one.
I'm not knowing, and I'm back. Sorry, I got the blue screen of death from Microsoft.
I knew it. Totally called it. But what they're talking about in some, like this video here, the way that things are breaking down, they have these layers, but we don't know when those layers were actually laid down and how this thing was constructed. And they could be laid down beside themselves like that. That to me is electrical sorting. But you see, it's hard to judge because we don't know.
Well, the Bible does say mountains can be created in a day and destroyed in a day, and we see this ability of the electrical forces to do that, to do just that, and it's more confirmation, in my view, that things that the lab coats and the scientific community want to tell us how it was isn't quite how it was.
Well, we were just talking about the first question that Rasmus had there, or in the Discord. By the way, if you're looking for the Discord, somebody in the chat was looking for the Discord. It's actually in the description of the video. You can actually just click right on it. It should jump you right in there. So we can, now that you're back, we had Chris from TakeBackSpace taking over, and he documented all the questions you probably missed. So.
I can jump in whenever you want for the next one.
Yeah, well, we wanted to get people who want to, if there's someone who is on the stream who want to ask a question, and we can get you going right over into Discord into the general chat, and then he can line you up and you can actually ask your question directly to me, and I'll put it right on the air there.
Brad, so we got Chrome Air up next, if you want to hop on the Discord, or Kronos even.
It's up to them, of course, but I wanted to make sure that anyone else wanted to answer this question or had any different things to add to it. Or I just want to be sure, because it's not just for me to answer. I mean, that's my interpretation of the events, but someone might have a more detailed answer.
Yeah, let's get the show rolling, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the mountain formations too. I mean, when we saw with David Brown's work, you know, he could pull a mountain up out of a mud puddle in a few seconds. Give it more current and large enough area, I'm sure you could pull a mountain up.
Well, that's very interesting and very. I've seen his work. Obviously, it's some of the most compelling stuff, and the way it can blister. And it's not just. It's the way, and of course, Garrett Hill had the same thing where he made a very similar to shiprock type of idea. Don't let me stop you guys.
Oh no, I thought you were continuing.
No, I didn't want to take too much of your time. That's all.
No, that's what I just wanted to throw in, because I mean, you kind of covered up with the time scales with the radioactive decay and whatnot. I was going to opine on that, but no sense in reiterating it.
I mean, I can throw some detail on this question. I mean, he's asking like, why does the electric universe basically think that things happen quickly? You know, I mean, you could. That's a really layman type of question, but you know, the fact that basically massive discharge from other planets or asteroids or comets could basically create what we see as these long-term geological formations in a shorter amount of time. right? That's the simplest way of explaining that?
Right.
Well, yeah, they don't. I mean,
They
they're
really don't account for electrical phenomena in all their equations anyway. So when you start throwing it in a catalyst that speeds up those reactions, the time scale has to change.
Are you talking about like dating techniques like
Yes.
potassium, argon? Right. Yeah, I talk about that on TakeBackSpace a lot. For me, it's always been this huge question mark. I don't really necessarily have all the tools to define something like that, but I find that very interesting. Like the size of Earth, shifts in gravity, shifts in charge might affect these experiments. Like, how do you really tell what the ice core record says when we really don't know the charge density on Earth at the time necessarily? So things might fluctuate, therefore changing these timescales radically. I think, Neil, you were saying like you can't really tell, right? But there's this idea that we have to know somehow that the world is a certain age, but maybe it's okay not to for now while we
Well,
extrapolate
yeah.
ideas, right? I
Well,
think there's a bit of psychology
I'm
in
very
that.
comfortable with. I mean, you have to be comfortable with not knowing, and but geology really had something important to say, because what they wanted to do is give themselves credibility, and that made them very real. They made them a real science, not a descriptive science. You know what I mean? And that gave them weight. And well, obviously there's some great work being done by some great people.
Science is really real now, you know.
Well, no, I mean, but they don't. It's easy to hold on to something quickly and to say this has to be. But you've seen just by discussing that we can be incorrect on our assumptions, and that will taint all of our visions going forward. One of the things, especially with dating and geology, is they have a word, magic. Like it's just millions of years, and that is just basically saying, and then magic happened, and then this, and that's not appropriate really in science. Although there is some scientific reasoning, but as Michael Steinbacher will tell you from a lot of descriptions, it's like, no, to make this particular type of rock, you would need to have boiling dinosaur urine or something, you know, like that type of thing, which is, of course, you know, that seems ridiculous, where you can have something created electrically much easier.
Would it be safe to say that, you know, based on our position in the universe, in our orbits, where other things are in space, could affect all experiments in general?
Yeah.
You know,
it could affect every single thing on the planet. Would be if we were to move into the let's say let's say Galactus could go and grab our planet and go pluck and then drop it around Alpha Centauri. We are in a completely different electrical environment. It is my opinion that every single thing that we think of as a constant would be different from that point forward. Like this metal is supposed to be this hard. Well, now it's this hard. You know, that type of thing. It's supposed to be able to take this much stress. Now it can only take this much stress.
So physical parameters, basically.
All physical parameters are based on something like a big knob that doesn't get turned very often. And it's
basically everything is always adapting to everything else all the time.
It seems, yes.
As a newbie, I can tell you that a lot of the language is conflated, not only by those of us who don't have science degrees, but also by people who are operating in different fields independently of each other. You know, the fact that Robert is super into geology, but doesn't know every single other person in his state that's also interested in such things, is evidence that we don't communicate with each other properly. Therefore, things like time are relative. So, example, if a flood has a limited time that it's going to create damage, but an epoch isn't a flood. So a flood can change the earth in a matter of hours or days, but then the aftermath of that disaster might live on for hundreds and hundreds of years or thousands of years. So these time scales for disasters and geological formation, some of them happen instantly, like electricity functions on an immediate level. The nature of electricity is action, is strike, is, you know, it happens quickly. A flood happens slowly. An earthquake happens. I mean, all these different geological events affect what we see geologically on the Earth today, and all of them happen on different time scales. So to ask, like, why does electric universe theory sort of suggest these different ways of looking at time? It really depends on what you're looking at, and like the other guys were saying, time is different. If the Earth, you know, if the Earth rotates, you know, in 24 hours, but in the past it rotated in 20 hours, in the future it rotates in 30 hours. That alone changes all of our time scales. So I think we have to think in terms of sequences of things as opposed to how long things last or how long they take, in order to really understand how the world works through electric universe eyes.
Michael Armstrong was actually talking about that, I think, Sean. He mentioned that was Dewardu was the type of guy, or Cardona, I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, I think that's right, yeah. Sorry, but that gentleman was very specific to try to put an order to things, but to not nail it down to dates. The dating can come later. You can get a connection once you can date something. You can at least start putting things into order.
Exactly. I found his insights incredibly helpful.
Well, Michael, what you were talking about just now really made me, I guess, think about this idea. And electricity is working on all scales at all time levels, like all time scales. So like on a geological time scale.
Orders of magnitude, exactly.
Yeah, on every order of magnitude it works, and it works differently, but it still uses the same type of geometry. And on a longer scale, you'll and instantaneously, like you were saying, it's the speed of electricity is the speed of light, ? But probably not. More like the speed of electricity is the speed of life, and the speed of light is faster than the speed of light. You know? Because of the exact interactions and the simultaneous interactions, not only with the gut and the sun, but there's other interactions that are faster than the speed of light. And I want to say that electricity is involved on all levels in that, but it might not be. It might be. I would say it is.
I think that's a good point.
I would say it is too. I think that like when I hear about the electron density of a quasar being what the steps it takes to become a galaxy, if we're following the Halton-Arp model on that, then I see that very similar to how we would be affected, and we must have been. I think that some of these steps occurred quickly, like there is evidence that everything was fine, and then we could know that on that one day we no longer could lift as much as we could lift. On that day, metal was weaker after that point, you know, type of feeling. We could have been not as strong. Biological material could have been weaker. There's so many different ways of looking at it because we don't know. But it seems to be the case, and it makes sense that we don't play around in that world too much. I was trying to explain that this could be the discrepancy about where we see like we put a atomic clock in space, an atomic clock on the Earth, or those type of things. The GPS satellites not being aligned properly, and they're in a different electrical environment though than we are. They're out in orbit. In between, we're sitting on a cathode, and they're in the Faraday dark space. You know, it's a different electrical potential there. This is the type of stuff I think about anyway. I hope that didn't go over people's heads. So,
well, it's concept stuff. You know, it's not. This is not geology, is it? But
no.
I think that time is something that we don't fully grasp, and I think time is something that, in general. But I also think it isn't as consequential as we think it is. I think it's a measuring stick that has its use, but I think if we want to slap a label of time on everything in order to understand it, it's gonna slow us down, because I think time is highly contextual.
Yeah, it's time is cyclical. It's just counting
and subjective.
Cycles. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's very indicative, though, that I keep wondering what the world must have been like prior to Kronos being the god of time, being the first clock face that we saw, as it were, rotating in the sky. You know, things.
Wouldn't yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say.
No, I was thinking in regards to time, people are talking about it in the chat, but this idea that time is really just a pattern recognition. It's just noticing rates of patterns between objects or between events.
Rates of change, yeah.
Yeah, rates of change. So I would wonder if that's one of the most primal conscious reconciliations, like as people and creatures notice these patterns, they grasp a sense of what time is. In a meta sense, and then of course cultures apply their identity of time. You know, they're like, for example, some cultures don't have single digits, or they group things in certain ways. We live in 2019, versus whatever 10,452, any number of things like that. So
exactly.
So culture defines it in a language way, linguistically, and then but I think creatures or the conscious etheric medium that manifests as all creatures and things must notice time as patterns, or I think notice time as patterns at different magnitudes, of course. So like a bug lives for a day, we live for a lifetime, planets live for 100,000 years, and they must know that to some degree. You know, if we think we're special enough to be conscious of our own existence, then I would bet that planets have their own sense of self-awareness.
Wow, I never even considered that. Right. I mean, I have in a way considered it with the Sheldrake idea, like what do other stars think of themselves?
I think time is experiential, and I think we treat it like a universal constant standard, and I don't think it is. And I think that's a big problem, and I think Einstein can be blamed. Blame Einstein.
I don't blame Einstein. I definitely still I'm mad at Eddington still. I think he's a guy I
blame Sagan.
I would blame Sagan for what he did to Velikovsky.
I mean, I'm watching Velikovsky on your screen, so I immediately thought of Sagan, but
well, yeah.
But the time thing, just to wrap up, that is like, Bug, what do they think about a human lifetime? Can they even conceive of that? And you can't really discount their opinion, because they clearly exist to bite us, or whatever, to create the circle of life of creatures, right? And you have this idea that they must all have a sense of time scales. They follow. Humans have this idea that we're somehow better and we're possibly smarter, but in fact, creatures follow, magnetic trails, or why do bees build honeycomb hives, for example, or birds migrate on magnetic pathways, and we're always so shocked by their abilities, right? It's like, oh my God, whales can navigate, and like, yes, of course they can. Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they?
Can.
Yeah. And they should be able to, of course.
Sorry, I'm trying not to hog. I just
no. That's perfectly fine. That's a good thought. I'm often compelled by questions like that. It's not unlike, if you think about it, Han Solo is really just Chewie's third dog.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he just has to introduce himself. I mean, why do you think the Jedi went? I mean, the Jedi, Obi-Wan went to talk to his old friend, you know, Chewbacca, and he didn't go talk to Han. No, he went to talk to Chewie, and Chewie probably just said, okay, I'll take you over to him, but careful, he bites. You know, like, so that would be the picture of what I'm seeing in some of these cases. How do you judge that? We were looking at that turtle. I think it's Jonathan. He was born in 1833 or something. He's 180 some odd years old. That's a pretty old tortoise.
I saw that.
But how do you judge that? Like, how do you judge life if you're that old, type of thing?
He judges us, Neil. You don't judge him. He judges us.
He's walking around going, suckers, they clean up my poop.
I own this entire place.
I know. Bring me more turtle bitches.
Lettuce is wilted. I will not have that.
I will not have that. I want better lettuce.
Quick, maybe newbie note. Explain who Velikovsky is, I guess, for people who might have never seen what you're showing.
Oh my God! Does anyone?
It's a newbie show, right?
I suppose. But yeah, let's also get some questions too. And I can see Arias talking here to my friend Rick. That's pretty good. But yes, I hope everyone knows who Immanuel Velikovsky is. Someone who wants to tell them, go ahead. So,
just if you haven't, checked out Worlds in Collision or Earth in Upheaval, or the whole story between, how they essentially ostracized him and book burned in this century. Just a brilliant thinker and an amazing philosopher and astronomer and theoretician who turned out to be right on a lot of occasions, especially like young Venus and the cratering and scarring of planets. So check out Immanuel Velikovsky. Sorry?
Hot Venus.
Yeah, Hot Venus is like a huge monumental prediction that turned out to be right, and he was 10 years ahead on that, and that nobody really, this astronomical community basically ignores.
I'd like to make the point for anybody who's watching and on the fence about Velikovsky. Let's put it this way: Carl Sagan was jealous, and if he had made the claims that Velikovsky did, he would have won one, if not more than one Nobel Prize. So
yeah,
if anybody's on the fence about Velikovsky, just think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, he also predicted radio noise from Jupiter, and he was right there too.
Sagan said he got lucky, or scientists said he got lucky guess. And I think, he made a lucky guess. Oh, he got lucky.
Well, actually, it was lucky that he decided to read and agree with what they wrote. So basically, his crime was he listened to the ancestors. Really?
Well, he listened to the legends and myth, and in the mid 1800s, myth, the meaning of myth was changed to story. Like Hollywood kind of.
Oh, stories. I think it was before that, but yes.
Well, officially, it was changed in the mid 1800s.
I would say the last vestiges, yes. Then there was, I think it was basically. I don't want to say it this way because I don't really know if it was really. I don't know if it was really to be said that it was. What's his name? The Origin of Species guy.
Charles Darwin.
Darwin, but that was probably the biggest switch up that happened ever. Because I can't blame Darwin for coming to this conclusion. He's just being reasonable with what he saw. But the way that they rolled with that and used it as a club, and then created this hostility, in a way, instead of just like, you don't have to explode just because someone mentions the Bible. I mean, if you're being smart and go and read the old books of the Bible and stuff, and it doesn't even matter that we call it the Bible at that point. If you basically just go old Hebrew literature, like that, just in a big bracket, then
in my opinion, there's also some anti-Semitic holdover in the scientific community, and Velikovsky was, I think, an easy punching bag at that time. I mean, it wasn't very far removed from World War II, and a lot of the basis of his work was rabbinic sources and the Bible. And
I never thought of that.
I think there's no ignoring it. I don't think a lot of people have talked about it, but I think that it probably rankled them because there is such a strong, I would say, atheistic curse, or not curse, but what's a vein or a strain in that goes all the way back to the 1800s and has to do with the end of catastrophism and the beginning of uniformitarianism. And
actually, you got a
away.
really good point there.
I think Darwin was only like the next stepping stone in that, because it started in the early mid 1800s and really gained steam as diffusion and catastrophism lost ground to the uniformitarian approach. And
well, yeah, the millions and millions of years concept, where they moved from the Bible mode to that. Yeah.
Once you get to 100 years later, that becomes sacrosanct. And Velikovsky presented a real threat to that, I think.
Ramon, we're thinking exactly the same. I mean, today we're just like, we're on exactly the same
Really
page.
good insight.
Because the Velikovsky, in my opinion, wrote the most important book over the past 1,000 years. And that whole uniformitarianism movement, they opposed the Church of England. I mean, it's real political, because catastrophism was the prevailing paradigm of the time. So it gets, almost predictable. Okay, this group over here opposes the Church of England, and then Velikovsky comes along, we'll say 100 years later, and writes that book, that anti-Semitic vibration, if you want to call it, trickled down right to him. Yeah. I mean, it's just real cut and dry. Like,
it accelerates too, if you think about it. At the time that he was being vilified is also the beginning of the DNA era, and the entire ability of mankind to manipulate genes all goes, I mean, truly manipulate them, not just pea pods and breeds, but actually working with DNA is going to that era. So anything that would threaten the essentially the divine right of man to act divine would necessarily be a problem. So if you start proving that the gods were real, even if they were spheres, that becomes a problem, because now it dredges up all of the religious motive that is dormant, but not really dormant. I mean, there's still a lot of people who are very religious, and so now he could give power to that, and people, they felt a connection, they felt something, they felt reinvigorated or excited to learn about their myths, whether it was Greek or Egyptian or whatever. And when he awakened that threatened the power structure in the universities that said that we were basically the masters of
exactly.
faith through science.
Yeah, it was part of the culture. We were the world was becoming mechanized, and we were all focused in the 50s and into the 60s and 70s and 80s, all focused on growth and productivity and all of and culture becoming more progress. Yeah, we were all supposed to be progressing, and there was no such thing as not progressing. It was always going to be going forward. He proposed that we look backward for the truth, and that was just like just a kind of dissonance culturally that I think was difficult for people. We're ready for it now because we're in a different place worldwide. The minds of everybody. There's we're talking about the newbies here, and I certainly consider myself a newbie, and I'm fond of saying honored to be a part of what you guys are doing here. But I got to tell you, there's one nugget of wisdom that I would offer anybody new to electric universe ideas or theories or plasma anything. It's simply the concept of the baby in the bathwater, and I've been kind of communicating this to anybody that would listen. But it's been a part of my struggle to understand that the people that I encounter are going to have different ideas with religion, with politics, with sociology, with social appropriateness, with what is okay, what is not okay, and all of the cultural shit that we're raised to believe has to be set aside in order to understand the truth. And every single person who I've met along the way has some nugget of truth to offer me, but I've had to, on many occasions, set aside my cultural ideas in order to get to that nugget. And so I would say that we have to have a spirit going forward of always seeking that nugget of truth in each other, regardless of how many differences we have, in order to go forward. Because I've not found any place that's free from the kind of crap that being struggled with. We're going to have to struggle with our cultural problems while we solve our galactic problems. And sadly, that's going to have to be something we figure out. So as we go, so baby in a bathwater, man. Everything I encounter, there's baby and there's bathwater, and it's about discernment to figure out what's true and what's not true for you and for me. But at the end of the day, people are people, and everybody has something to offer. That's my 2 cents.
Here, here.
That's more than fair.
Yeah, and look at when you look at the uniformitarianism movement as opposed to catastrophism, then we'll say 100 years or so later, Velikovsky drops the bombshell. In that period of time, Champollion was doing the earliest decipherments of Egyptian text, and just look at how the paradigm shift kind of took place. And then by the time just say science gets rolling, so to speak, and what Walt Thornhill calls the gaslight era, myths now are looked at as just unintelligible jargon from primitive people, essentially, or people that we know they don't think like we do today, but it was written off. Then you have the Jungs of the world that say, no, well, they're archetypes and they mean this, but then Velikovsky was like, well, no, they actually mean this. It's as if we're going forward to go backwards.
Well, we just lost the concept, certain concepts. I mean, anyone watching Stargate can see the myths being played out wonderfully, or Thor Ragnarok stuff. You can watch the myths being played out, but they're put into people, into us, like our size. But it was often said that the only people that have will are people, us, and the gods, because they do things of their own accord. Now, that's because they're, they have their own motion and they can light on fire and, blast things to pieces and do that kind of thing. They're they can do things. We do things. Now, we couldn't understand what they did or why they did it. That's why they were capricious, and they were, you get lots of confusing ideas on what the intentions were meant, but people really paid attention to them. That's for sure. So.
Absolutely.
I really paid attention to Neil deGrasse Tyson for a long time. I mean, I still am sad that I no longer have the respect for him that I once. It's true for Velikovsky. In the future, there'll be people who will see things that he has thought that are not accurate, and that doesn't mean that Einstein was a terrible human being or that Neil deGrasse Tyson is an evil person. It just means that everyone is a stepping stone for all of us, and each of us has something to offer.
Yes.
And I mean that socially, but I mean that just as importantly amongst our heroes and our leaders, that there's no one, I'm sad to report, who truly embodies every idea and thought that I personally hold. So as a result, you got to pick and choose. It's baby in bathwater, baby. That's how it works.
I don't know, Captain Kirk or maybe Picard. I can't think of anyone else. Janeway, yeah.
The only one that I truly respect is Janeway.
It's not crunch time yet, Mr. Kim. I'll let you know when.
Yeah.
I can hop in about just this idea of integration of different crafts, this idea of compartmentalization and people doing specialty stuff, and the reason you don't have chemists talking to astrophysicists and you don't have biologists recognizing the electrical nature of cellular growth. It's really because you don't have team leadership. And I know that this goes into the whole corporate capitalist kind of methodology, but there is something to be said for having things work and function. And so, in a way, this congregation on the Electric View, or any of these shows where there's kind of integration of different people from different skill sets and putting them all together to actually be able to have a dialogue is really important. There is no kind of mystery to it. When people are like, why don't people talk? It's because you don't have a team leader or multiple team producers. And I feel like that's something that needs to be really talked about. No one really mentions that, but organization is why we live in this environment of science deception, quote unquote. But like, it's because people don't know exactly what to ask for, because there is no dialogue on these types of issues.
No
in-depth dialogue on these types of issues.
It's not something that they do. I mean,
I would say that that's about what's your incentive. If our entire science community is set up for to chase funding, then we're not really creating a round table of great minds to dialogue, are we? We're creating competition. Competition creates secrecy, and I'm going to sabotage your work because I want mine to look better. We've seen that over and over and over again. I'm struggling with the sort of, the necessity for the capitalist competition. It's an obvious failure.
Well, but the thing is, the organization of systems like that do work, though. The reason the news comes across as the news is because they're ordered and they're specific and they're repetitive. The reason pop music gets imposed on the culture is because it's organized and it's repetitive and direct and it's glossy as hell. You talk
the
about
reason this conversation works is because of a determination of those of us who are willing to talk to people because we want to gain knowledge for ourselves, not because it's organized. Let's be honest, this conversation is anything but organized.
I was about to say, shouldn't we be getting some questions read?
Yeah, but there is one problem, is that this conversation doesn't threaten the position of the status quo. So the point that Chris is making is,
not yet, baby, not yet.
It works when you attain position and organization. This is right in the art of war. It's straight out of the art of war. Position, to establish position, you do have to be organized.
I actually I'm really just gently nudging at that concept, just based on, let's say, the Sapphire video that just came out, right? That quality of video, that quality of production is going to just bring a lot more people in. It's just getting a better camera. It's just writing a tighter screenplay, whatever, like script, and then promoting that and getting people to think like that. Like right now, I'm looking. We have 25 people watching, right? We have half as many on the actual Skype call. This is amazing, and I'm not in any way, no way poo-pooing it. I'm saying I just drive towards making things better and getting the word out there. I'm all about like trying to get things moving. So that's just my take on it. It's just like a cultural thing that I feel like organization matters and team leaders do matter, even if it's just introducing people like Neil has here. So.
Well, and more to the point, Velikovsky himself was a leader, and then he became a team leader because he had an entire following. It took some years, but he had a following of people who were extremely dedicated, and to this day still are acting upon, I guess, an unspoken decree, or I don't know. I wouldn't call it an agenda, but most definitely when they started organizing and James can talk more about it, and the other older members, but they got together to get more organized, to agree on some things, and decide what they weren't going to say, and then they went forward, and the Thunderbolts project directly came out of that. There's no mistake.
Actually, and we directly came out of that. So if you're watching that video of Bond to the Past, and you see those people that are sitting there talking with the magazines, they flip over and they're supporting Velikovsky. Well, those people, we're the end result of those people's work, in a way, because they're gone now. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here. So I guess I have a great respect for that.
I guess what I was trying to say with what Velikovsky did, essentially, because I've over the years seen and read articles that, you know, for a while mythology was written off for just what it was, cultural content at the time. You have translations or transliterations. It was used for source work for movies. It was used for a long time.
Still is.
And we have that within it, still is. But Velikovsky pushed it to the critical stage. Like, we have to look at this critically with the critical eye. And that's what, you know, as we always talk about, scientists definitely don't even consider it. And a lot of scientists go to church every Sunday. Let's be quite real with it. I mean, they're looking at their lane. This is what I do every day, and this is what I do on Sunday. But have you ever considered cultural content and the catastrophes aren't spread out now 30 million years ago and something happened and it was an impact? The answer is no. Not until Velikovsky just dropped the bomb. And I'm like, wow, you know, he just dropped the bomb on the whole world. I wish, or my wish would be that people would consider it, you know, would just consider it, read the book, consider it, you know. That's why we're talking here right now anyway, and the sciences and things of that nature. That's kind of what I was trying to say with how the uniformitarianism movement kind of changed the paradigm. At the same time, you know, all these excavations are going on and people are digging things up, and now we haven't been through a shorter cycle of catastrophes. Now the catastrophes are so far back that it doesn't really mean anything. So then you have the creationism versus evolution, you know, thing going on, and none of it makes sense if you ask me.
It comes up again.
Go ahead, Ramon.
It comes up again with the Arthurian stuff, because one of the ways that they took away the right to say that Arthur was a historical figure and to just call it myth, and therefore, as we acknowledge, to say it's all fiction. One of the things that they did was to deny the existence of Troy. Now, at the time that they denied the origins of the Brits coming from Brutus, from Troy, it had not been found. But then after it was found, they didn't go back and say, oh, our bad, I guess those Welsh stones are right. They continued a program of denying the Welsh people their own history. And in fact, it was illegal for hundreds of years for students to hear Welsh in school. And so they only heard it at home. Now, of course, in Wales, they have the signs and they speak the language, and they kept their ethnic traditions in many ways. But it doesn't change the fact that for hundreds of years, for political reasons and academic reasons, the Welsh language was stamped out of the local population in an effort specifically to get rid of the Welsh histories that directly tied King Arthur as the king in Glamorgan and Gwent to the real British tradition, because you had all these other Germanic families that came over to take over. That is not unrelated to what happened in science. It's all related. And the ability to deny historical facts in order to just poo-poo it as myth, it's all about control. And it just continued on into the modern era. In fact, there's more than one. There's 4 King Arthurs, for God's sakes. But you still have people think that there wasn't one. There's 4 of these guys.
I'm the Merlin.
And well, then you know, you had beyond myth, you had stories where Velikovsky dropped the bomb, if you will. Cultural content has stories of ghouls, goblins, leprechauns.
Of course, yeah.
You know, right? And it's still everything was disconnected. You know, in the 19th century, if you will.
But let me
more disconnected. And
let me talk about this. Sorry, I just want to say, let me just finish up this part. One of the things that they were talking about that you made a reference to there, Chris, from TakeBackSpace, is the idea that they need to be like a more organized sort of way of putting it. And I think that the problem is that there is no there's no harm in being wrong. There's no
Amen.
crime on being wrong if you're an astronomer. You just go, astronomers are surprised. And then the article continues. Doesn't matter if your guess was totally wrong. But if you're building a building and you guess it's wrong, then the building falls down. Yeah, they blame you. They point fingers directly at you. But if you're wrong in astronomy, as long as you don't screw up the friggin' mirror on the telescope, you're fine. No one won't even get news. And that's my thoughts on that, that they don't have any. I mean, there's a lot of good people doing good scientific work, but when there's no requirement to be right, you know, I mean, if you made a guess and you were wrong, and you were fired when you were wrong, yeah, people would be friggin' right every time. They wouldn't be on this kick. But right now, they can just sort of kick back and relax, and they go, oh, it must be neutron stars. That's why it can spin so fast. Really? Yep, that's my theory. I'm sticking to it.
You can't argue for that, though, because otherwise we wouldn't have germ theory. So, not that germ theory is completely correct, but definitely an advancement. And at the time that it was proposed, it was officially wrong. So you want to have the ability for people to disagree.
Oh, yes, completely. Yes, that has to be. But I just meant, well, and of course that turned out to be something that turned out to be right because someone's coughing a lot on the air right now. Again, continue coughing all the time, and it's live. Will you shut the fuck up?
I was
Get a girl.
Jesus Christ.
I say that whole scientist baffled things. Is that what you were mentioning, Neil?
Yes, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's more about. I think it's actually what Donald Scott referred to as purple prose the other day.
Yeah, I saw that.
Poetic. I used to say poetic platitudes. It's like basically the Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku language that's written by producers. This is ultimately what I'm saying is like the reason I think people are misinformed is because these articles hype up these theories that don't really have a lot of substance, but you need to sell articles. So there should be standards and practices for science and astronomy. I'm actually completely of the mind that there absolutely should be. You shouldn't be able to write an article that has really rogue elements of team leadership. Like, why would you invest any money in SETI or exoplanet research when there's water and ice on the moon? Like, it's insane to me. I know that people think, oh, just let them do what they will. But really, why don't we have bases on the moon or a telescope on the moon or a radiation station on the moon or any number of things before these absolutely what sound sci-fi stories? Exoplanet, even if you found an exoplanet that's Earth-like is purple prose to me. How can you really tell what's Earth-like from this distance? You know, that's
really and we totally
people.
Get the wrong impression anyway. They go, oh, we're seeing this here, and that's only caused when you heat it to 2,000 degrees or get 12 volts across it. Like it's those type of things that are done difficult in one is very easy in another frame of reference. And if you don't even understand the reference frame, if you've never been trained on it, it's frustrating. However, so let's get to another question though, because I don't even know if anyone's still writing them down. I'm hoping that they are.
I still have the first 4, but
I
stopped.
Let's go with the first 4 that we had then, and then we'll try to get people onto Discord and see if Jim could cough at them, or it's not Jim, Rick.
Here, I'll read 3. They're all short, and you guys pick one.
All right. Well, no, we'll do the first one. Just do it quick, and we'll do it quick as possible.
So Crowmare, way back in the beginning, says correlation between most recent solar geostorm and the increased intensity of Dorian during the exact same time frame, and how these relate to the global electric circuit.
Well, I would have to say straight up that the pathways of the circuit that is following this, yes, it seems that the increased output from the sun did seem to have an effect because it did get increased at the same time. However, we do know that if I'm not mistaken, it left land and then went to shallow, hotter water at the same time. So I would want to be careful before I directly attributed them. But my thoughts would be they should appear shortly thereafter. It depends on the speed of the solar wind at the time. Sometimes it takes 3 days to get here, sometimes it takes 30 minutes. I'm willing to explore that, and by virtue, it should happen. However, like I said, I want to be absolutely sure before I just didn't attribute it to some hot water. So
Probably it'd be a lot better for people to just search for, there's a half dozen papers at least on the September 2017 event with 3 hurricanes and the 2 X-class solar flares. That'd probably be the better place for people to start.
well, there you go. See, now that's what we're talking about. Next question.
All right. So Kronos says, Neil, on Thunderbolt's project, latest Sapphire video at 4213, is Sapphire creating tiny planets? And I think Chris Connors also just asked a question, says, Sapphire seems to validate alchemy. What's your take?
I'm going to actually look up the new Sapphire project video. And what was the time stamp?
4213. I think the little spherals probably, but maybe I'm not.
I think you're right.
I saw the video.
I'm looking for.
I thought it was tantalizing. It definitely had teasers, and they suggested that there was certainly stuff that they were doing that they weren't ready to share. And I was very impressed. It's very exciting work. But I want to know what they're not willing to tell us yet.
I'd probably be careful calling it alchemy, only in that we have in the community the structured atomic model, and it'd probably be better if people call it that when they're out in the public. If you want to call it alchemy for yourself, that would be obviously fine. But we don't have any papers. We don't have any proof. We don't know what the catalyst was. So I would say that it's a step in the right direction for the structured atomic model. I'm sure Edwin's very excited about it. I would stop short of calling it, a validation for alchemy. But I would say that there's a question as to the origins of alchemy. At least let's take the Chinese side, they were doing systematic chemistry 2,500 years ago. The Egyptians were doing some of the same work. There's a strong chance that the ancients witnessed some transmutation. You look at the copper ore in Michigan, it's too pure, and there's silver embedded in the copper. That's a family jump, right? Not an immediate atomic, the element's not next to it, it's down the family. So there's probably strong evidence that they witnessed transmutation, and that was the origins of the concept of alchemy. So I would say it's actually the opposite. I think it would be validation for natural processes, and the validation for alchemy is that it would be based in something real that happened.
Well, yeah, and plus you got to understand that way back when, they don't understand the difference between a chemical reaction and a potential nuclear reaction either. I mean, an element going to another, I wouldn't suspect anyway that they had high-powered microscopes and were plotting out the periodic table. That's what I'm saying. But clearly, when they transform something into something else, that would not be a surprise at all. Now, what was the exact timestamp? I want to make sure I'm at that, because I think I saw it. It was 42 something?
4213 is what I captured, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, that's fine. He wanted to see these anode tufts here, I think. 4213. Just 1 second. I want to make sure we're there. Because this is, he might be seeing just the anode tufts on the anode here. So.
Yeah, Kronos, please confirm. Maybe I'm wrong. I just copied it from the chat. So it said at 4213, but I remember the spherals actually being earlier in the video. So maybe he's talking about the tufts. Or I think they're. Actually, I just found you a link though as well, which is a spheral from the moon. I posted it in your Skype link. It's in NASA APOD. It's fascinating. I just dropped it in Skype.
Yeah, but, I'll grab that.
The world is filled with blueberries.
Yeah, just back to the alchemy subject for a second. People got to remember that the historical context for alchemy is definitely in the Middle Ages, as far as in the West. And even in China, really, external alchemy started after the Han Dynasty. So people had already forgotten a lot of secrets. So what you have is people are acting upon stories which are based upon legends, which are based upon myths. and they're doing their best, and they're doing these chemical experiments, but they didn't have electric generators. There's no way that they would be able to replicate what the ancients would have seen.
They didn't have batteries.
How can you validate something that is not exactly already, it's already not working correctly? So if anything, what they're doing is validating something from the ancient days.
Oh, I know what he's talking about. It was just a pipette that was moved down towards the thing. It wasn't a sphere rising. That's what he's talking about. Anyway, sorry.
Good deal.
Okay.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
That was part of the video. Don't worry about it. Go on there, Ramon.
No, that's all I had to say about that. Is I think that Sapphire is doing a better job of validating the Jovian age and the Venus catastrophe than it is, anything from the Dark Ages.
I agree.
There are some great There's some great science from the Dark Ages, but most of it's mechanical.
What about the land of Punt from like Velikovsky's Earth and Upheaval and Ages in Chaos, when he talked about all the silver that they had when Egypt came over to visit?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably
where the hell did that all come from?
There's probably strike sites near too. I mean, Velikovsky specifically mentions some rabbinic source, but he doesn't say what its name is. That when the Red Sea was lifted up, that there was a strike nearby, and then that's when it came crashing down. Now, this rabbinic source is rather mysterious, but I imagine that it was probably related to why the Hyksos left and came over,
There is a big crater area in Saudi Arabia right on the western side.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I imagine that probably there were some great ore sources in that area, and I'm sure there was tons of legends surrounding it if Mecca is any indication.
Possibly.
So if we acknowledge that Earth cycles are cyclical, don't we have to also acknowledge that human knowledge and awareness of the universe is cyclical, to the extent that past civilizations would have had high technologies of this or that may have seemed like wizardry to others? I mean, isn't that standard thinking?
Well, it is to me.
Puma Punko to like in the Dark Ages.
But we actually see it, like I said. It's written right down very clearly. I mean, The Tempest by Shakespeare. I mean, he's literally calling upon, witches in Hamlet. I mean, it's the same thing where they're doing all the same motifs are passed down, and all the way. That's passed all the way down to the Dark Crystal, for God's sakes. This is how much these things continue to get passed down.
The oldest known document to human existence.
Yeah, there you go. See? But that's what I mean.
Which just got a new series on Netflix.
I kind of want to see that, actually.
You know what? I got old, and now the Skeksis voices drive me fucking nuts. I can't listen to it.
Actually, you're probably right.
It's that. Sorry for the language. It's the screeching sound. I'm just too old and grumpy. I want them off my lawn.
Old and grumpy. They want them off my lawn. That's good. But there is some truth that we don't know, like what the ancients had and what they could do. But it's clear that they were doing some pretty amazing things. That is much more advanced than that they say. It looks like we tried to recover some of their technology, and then during the Roman era, we'll call it, where that would have been really kind of like a heyday, and then everything went to hell again. And I guess this would be the third time that we tried to bring back electricity.
And that's just in this epoch.
Yeah, actually, yeah. The trouble was, I think, before is that they were concealing it. The same thing that was the big problem in the 1500s. They were concealing it. That they wanted to experiment on their own. But to be fair, what they were doing was get your head chopped off worthy. So, or burned on a stake type of worthy. So I can understand their reluctance to be. Look at how brave, like I said, Copernicus was. He was so brave, he waited until after he died before he published. So, he was smart. He went the right way. It's like, I don't care. I'm good. but we didn't know what technology that they had. But it's clear that looking at the project that we see here, the Sapphire project and others, that Bath was, if nothing else, it should have just been renamed the Transmutation of the Elements Conference, or Cold Fusion Conference, Low Energy Nuclear Reactions, because that's basically all we started talking about. I mean, it was obvious that like 3 or 4 people were all focused on the same thing, and it was just a big connection.
You talk about Copernicus.
I'm sorry.
You're talking about Copernicus, and I have to imagine this is a man who thought what he had to share was so important that he didn't dare trust anybody alive information, but he still had faith and hope in. Well, I said faith. That's right, and I'm an atheist, and I said faith. He still had faith in the potential of humanity in the future. That I relate to. So, how many of you relate to that idea? I don't trust anybody I know, but I still have hope for humanity. That's a very cognitive. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance there, and I think all of us, newbies especially, are experiencing an immense amount of cognitive dissonance. We all come into this knowledge with fear and trepidation and uncertainty, and our paradigms are being destroyed. I'm the kind of masochist that really gets off on paradigm destruction, but I am in the vast minority, and I think a lot of us here on the call are as well. We're going to have to learn to communicate to people who really are not comfortable with having their paradigms crushed. And
it's never comfortable.
Yeah, it's hard for a lot of people. I just happen to be crazy and get off on it, but I'm in the, I'm not in the majority at all. But this Copernicus idea that he didn't trust anybody alive, but still had faith in humanity.
Well, he trusted that they would burn him at the stake.
Yeah, well, right. Okay, special kind of trust. But
that's a special kind of trust.
He had a really good lawyer.
Yeah, his lawyer was like, just wait till he's dead, and then he gave it to his nephew, and the nephew went, "Here's what my uncle said." That was it. So it was a much smarter move on his part there.
Yeah, he was definitely very wise.
Speaking of, I just noticed this on the call there. I see that Tim Williams said, if ancient humans had any worthwhile tech, then like today, would they be able to engineer against natural catastrophes or disasters? Tim, I think that they tried. Think that they tried very hard to do that. I think that's what some pyramids were. It looks like some of them were, if they were a sort of a capacitive buffer between the land and the sky in some cases, that they could suck power from or use it as a sort of like a drain over a dam, as opposed to what happened later. It looks like some of them were literally just exploded. And I think that that would be them hooking up to this circuit, and unlike today, what we do today to not let that happen is we use magnetic coupling. So I will use, to run a motor, or let's say this computer that's in front of me, I will use the magnets, inductors, and capacitors to store the energy, and I will keep it separate from the actual current on the wall, so that they are linked together, but they are not, but they're magnetically linked. That means that the entirety of the power grid cannot dump across my computer or me. It's separate, completely separate. Otherwise, that is a possibility. And we use those at the end of every step-down voltage transformer for pretty much the same reason. You could never get more than 2,000 volts across any one thing, which is a lot safer than getting the entire power grid across your lamp, and then,
I don't know if there's a lot of evidence that they had that problem.
I just said some of them look like they would blow it up.
With the Great Pyramid, because they were generating the maser using chemistry. As far as we know, there was certainly a chamber explosion that pushed the walls out and cracked the ceiling. But there's no necessarily proof that it's because they were coupled to something. Now, it could be possible that they were coupled, and then the atmosphere, that there was some massive coronal mass ejection, or a planetoid went by and rubbed the atmosphere. The two magnetospheres induce a current that came down, cause a backflow of current in the maser. But I don't see any major proof that they were doing anything, with widespread grid. But the problem is anything they would have done has either oxidized or more likely been flooded away with mega tsunami. Or
That wouldn't
and then
surprise
after
me,
that, raided, melted, and turned into something else, or turned into treasures, because after all, people revered. Bear this in mind: when the Buddha died, immediately 3 different kings descended upon the location and divided up his body because they thought they could absorb the Buddha's power and become and enter heaven themselves if they had pieces of him.
Yeah, because that's sane. Please go on.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, there are people out there who worship the Shroud of Turin. I mean, it's
no, I know. I'm just laughing. So it just
there's a whole. I know. I'm agreeing with you, and what I'm saying is that the engineers at Egypt would have been seen as both crackpots and dangerous, and then also later revered as practically gods themselves by tribesmen who lived only a matter of dozens of kilometers away, let alone all the way over in Saudi Arabia. They could come and raid in order to escape their hardships and to do some pillage economy. The world existed mostly under pillage economy. There weren't a huge number of intelligent men running around doing everything. There were concentrations of it in various places, and those places do seem to be correlated to good caloric access, and geography played a huge part, and farming. And so you have just a few places where all these factors came together well to create the economic conditions that enabled intelligent men in order to do something great and combine their faith, because of course the whole world was under this faith. And so, in other places, all they did to stave it off is rip hearts out. And they were like, oh, that'll keep the war god away.
Yeah.
So, now, can we, the question is, can we do something about grades 6, 7, 8 catastrophes? I think so. Obviously, you can't do nothing about supposed black holes and whatnot, but I do think that there are things that can be done about major catastrophes, and some of them can be done from Earth, and some of them, you got to leave Earth. But I think we definitely need to have more than one basket. The problem is Mars's atmosphere is too thin because Venus took most of it. So, we got to transfer atmosphere, and then we got to terraform the daggone thing. That's going to take not a short amount of time, and not a small amount of power either. So we've got to harness the space current.
I think we need to find a yellow submarine.
Or you just open up the currents, because sapphire is made.
I love
nitrogen and whatnot.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt anyone.
I was saying in sapphire in the chamber, they showed that it was making oxygen, nitrogen, and all the breathable gases. So I just say we zap the shit out of it again if we had to terraform it.
Well, as long as you're doing the right thing and pulling from one material or one planet to the other correctly.
Yeah.
What planet do you want to take the atmosphere off of today, though?
Yeah, one of the big things we're going to need to do is harvest Europa's water, and that's going to be we're going to need an entire economy set up just so that we can do that without breaking the economy that we have. And so that space trade, first we got to get out there so we can start just the same as before, bartering and a little bit of mining and prospecting, a lot of the, speculation, and there's going to be a lot of broken hearts and minor 49ers, and it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be worth it. And then afterwards, then I'd say we'll be doing a fair sight better. That doesn't mean that we will escape problems. I posted that article where NASA, said the asteroid was going to miss us and crash in the Caribbean. We may have our VEI 7 or 8 event before that. We may have other things that happen, but I have great faith that humanity will survive it, because we've survived, and we're in a pretty stable position, and we've survived really bad catastrophes before. So I think if anything, it would give us impetus.
Hybrid.
You know what I'd really like to write a story about sometime, if I could think of one? is what would be an awesome story if everything that we said could be verified simply because we find a seed vault, but not our seed vault, but a seed vault from the civilization from prior. You know what I mean? Like something like that. That would be an excellent introduction.
There might be one. There could be one at Göbekli Tepe. As far
that
as we
type
know,
of thing.
they
Yeah.
won't excavate it.
Yes.
Well, that's what I mean. Something like that. Something that we could. Yeah. No. We went to a place and we found that no one's ever been in there. Like a King Tut's tomb of.
Well, there could have been one in Cappadocia, but we won't know because the poor sap who found it was so scared about what he found, he immediately turned it over to the authorities. And since then, I mean, it is completely regulated. So at the bottom of Cappadocia, there could have been a seed vault, or it could have been leftover, evidence. But there might be other places like that. Is the point, and they could be even older. We just don't know.
Well, yeah, it was just something that struck me because I keep on seeing these just looking at the blocks from Japan that look like they're fit together and stuff like that, and Peru, and you're just like, damn. I mean, this is some tough work. This looks like it's done like very engineered for a good friggin' reason, not for no reason whatsoever, you know.
And
hey, Neil.
Another thing to mention about the Cappadocia find is that guy, he found it completely by accident, breaking drywall in his house to try to make an expansion. So it's there.
That's
they
right.
could be out there any moment.
Yeah, exactly.
What would happen if we were actually looking? Have you heard of the Badlands Guardian, Neil?
No. I have not.
The Badlands Guardian. It's basically a geological feature in Canada.
Oh.
And it's a really good conversation starter because it looks like it's sculpted out of the earth, but there are also other features in the area that might really interest you. You might want to pull it up and check it out.
Well, let's do that. But what's the next question? Since we actually are trying to actually answer them.
I only got a couple more here, but Dravo says way back, I'm not really new, but I've never heard a plain explanation of what kinetic alphane waves are. Anyone want to give it a go?
Whew. That's actually a pretty good one.
Unfortunately, Gareth isn't in the chat.
Not right now, no.
That would be the person who's best to answer it. Yeah.
Alphane waves are basically like transverse or sound waves, but they're in a plasma, and you can actually see them as they progress. They were proved to be true, but the thing is that it does take a bit of time for a wave. Like plasma is not an instant reaction as much as we'd like to think it is. It's very fast, though. Faster than light. We know that much. I'll look up alphane waves now. Okay. Oscillate in response to restoring force provide. Yeah, okay. Basically, just what we said. They basically compress and expand as they go along. Anyway, unfortunately, I do not know as much as I would like to, but apparently there's some fantastic videos in it, but most of them are made based off of magnetohydrodynamics, and again, that's not necessarily proper, but was Badlands were the other things we were looking at? Okay. I'll take a look there too. Oh wait, there's a little video here.
I posted links in the comments.
Sorry, I'm just looking at what this guy might have had up here. It looks like the same picture over and over again. That ain't going to help me very much. So, all right. Unfortunately, I wish I don't. I know that they're basically like that, but I don't. A lot of people want to attribute them to some semi-magical properties too, and they're not. they're something you can find. They're not something magical. They're more like eddy currents in metals and stuff like that. Obviously, they don't spin in circles, though. So it was the Badlands. What was it, Guardian? You said. I'll go look at that.
I posted a couple links in the Skype comments. I don't know if that helps.
Oh, that thing. That's just yeah. I'm not. That's just a etching. Mostly water, actually. Some of them it looks like water here, but or at least it was electric, but then worn down from the plateau.
I can comment on pareidolia and the phenomenon, which is essentially that things in nature look like people and things. I mean, we're talking about it in plasma cosmology, but it's basically everything is recursive because it is the same matter in different densities and different sizes and fractals at different magnitudes. So you'll see shapes and heads, and you know, there's a sphinx somewhere and there's a rock in Africa. It looks like a giant statue. Some of
I've
them
seen
are
a lot
real
of that
statues.
that I'm not. Yeah, that especially when I go to Mars, it's the same effect. Like I'm like, dude, no, it's probably not. I mean, now that we know that Mars was mangled beyond all recognition, the chances of us finding something there made by someone is low.
But it's also as simple as doing two dots in a line, and all of a sudden your brain fills in the rest, and you create a face.
Yeah,
so
that's
it's,
true.
Our brain is very, you know, the conscious field is very capable of filling in patterns. So
well, faces are incredibly important to know whether or not you're in danger. So it makes perfect sense.
So this looks awesome as a profile. It's like an amazing 2D representation, but probably just naturally formed, right?
Yeah, that's my opinion. Yeah.
Look close.
Looks great though.
You can almost see another face to the right, and it's almost looking upwards with a long beard.
I think true. Yeah. Yep, it's everywhere. But well, at least we know that. What was the last question that we had? And then we'll go try to pick out a few more from these poor people.
I had one just from Jackass Chicken, which is a great name, says, if Earth's jet streams are all wobbly due to the solar minimum, then what would happen with Jupiter's jet streams? That's all I got.
Honestly, I don't know if our jet streams. Oh, the jet streams are okay, yes. Well,
I think that
because he's on.
I think that Jupiters are a lot more regular because the current is much stronger, and they're pretty stable whenever you'll try and find that North Pole animated GIF that shows the counter rotation, because
sure
it'll probably the jet streams on Earth, as I understand it, they tend to move more because the current isn't nearly as strong, so there's not as much conformity. But when we're at the strength of either summer or winter, the currents are at their strongest, and that's when we have the strongest concurrence of the vortex. But during the other, you know, the midpoints of the season, the streams can move about because the current is, I don't know if you want to use the word diluted, but it's not as strong. But Jupiter produces its own current, and it stays pretty regular. There might be some currents, some streams underneath the clouds that we can't see, but they have measured some internal gyres, and now they've seen different masses and stuff. They've got some measurements of the interior structure of Jupiter that might be of interest to people.
I'm actually very interested in that. Yes.
Hey Andy, what do you got to say on that one?
Is Andy here?
He's here. I just saw him join on.
Well, that's friggin' awesome.
Because he got the whole eye of the storm thing.
You guys don't hear me yet, do you?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, we hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm listening.
How's it going?
Great. Great. I just been listening in. I had a little technical difficulty getting sound before, so I didn't.
We weren't even expecting you. I just saw that you were over there in the other chat, and I was like, "Holy crap, that's Andy!" And I was like, "He's not. He's probably trying to get on here," because I saw that you tried to call me during the call, obviously. And so I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna add them to the list, and then it automatically called you. I wasn't trying to get it to do
Are you
that.
there?
But yeah, I hear you.
Oh, okay. I lose my sound. I lost my sound when I try to plug in my microphone. So I'm just talking over my computer. I hope it doesn't sound like a potato.
Sounds fine.
Okay. Well,
good to hear you.
You guys were talking about Jupiter and Earth's jet streams. And my theory is that during the solar minimum, when the sun is actually putting out less energy and we're receiving less, that I think the Earth loses stored energy in order to come back into a voltage balance, basically, with the sun. So I think the solar minimum causes the planets to exhaust their internal energy, and that stirs up storms and increases the wind speeds. That's my thought on the subject, and I think that's what we're seeing. And as we enter a solar minimum, we get the jet stream pulling down further south and being more active. On Jupiter, I think there's changes undergoing right now, and like in the Great Red Spot, I believe I've read that it's shrinking and taking some form. I'm not sure if the shrinkage means it's weakening. It could mean it's strengthening and tightening, if you know what I mean. So anyway, that's my thought. Of course, it's totally unsubstantiated. I don't have any data to go by.
Well, we have the idea that if something was birthed from that particular area, it would be a different charge, and there could be things rotating around it, like you described before, sort of like healing the wound, as it were. But you're right. I don't know on exactly. I do know that it is shrinking, though. I saw it in. I noticed a difference, I guess, from the most recent one was 84, or oldest thing I saw was 84 from that movie 2010. There, when they sent Voyager by, they took some good pictures there in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was pretty large then, and it's now apparently lost some of its color, and it's no longer 3 times the size of the Earth. And it used to be, they have drawings of it from like the 1500s or something, and it's quite large. Like it was like a cigar going across it back then. It could have been a whole band at the like way back when, you know. Like I don't know. I mean, I could just envision that it circled the planet. That's
Yeah. Well, there's other changes going on too. I think there's a big new red spot developing, if I remember right. I think it's red. It's like this eruption of red material coming up from below and bursting out into the clouds.
Yeah, sort of spiraling upwards in my idea. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's
quick
you
note.
asked, just thought I'd throw that in. Yeah.
Also, I want to say, awesome, Andrew Hall. I love your work. This Take Back Space, Chris. I really appreciate you joining, and I've always appreciated your work. I want to say thanks and hi, and also I dropped in a link for you, Neil, which is a shot from Damian Peach, who's one of the amateur astronomers who takes really amazing shots of Saturn and Jupiter, and you can see, like, he's been doing it for about 20 years. You can see the hexagon on the pole. You can see real, like, non-space agency stuff and over a long period of time.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at it right now. So this is a picture of Jupiter and Saturn.
So if you click at the bottom, you'll see Jupiter and Saturn, and he has like long pages where he's done like over the course of 10, 15 years, and you can see the size of the.
Oh, okay. So there we go. You can see it over time. That's 10 years after the last time I saw it. Sorry, I'm just amazed because I'm just looking at photos now of Jupiter, and they're not taken. Like, I haven't seen actual telescopic pictures of Jupiter for a long time. Like I said, probably 80s.
Well, I encourage all of you, and some people there are people in the chat who join my stream, but I stream Jupiter every night if I can. And so I've been watching it. I want to say even in 5 years, it's actually changed size, but I'd have to really superimpose all the footage. But this is one of the guys who inspired me to start doing astro imaging.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, and his Saturn shots are astounding. Yeah.
Piggybacking on what Andy said, people have got to remember that the transformer model for the Earth and for just the planets in general and their relationship with the electric star. And in induction is the storage of current. And so, a transformer inherently has induction going on. And there's going to be, I would reckon, variable induction happening in that the transformer relationship is going to change. Basically, your so-called coils ratio is going to change based on the motion inside the Earth, the season, the distance, and even, I guess, you know how eddy currents have eddy currents that come off of them. I would say some of the weather as it moves around the Earth is probably also affecting this relationship. And so that's going to either create better or worse conditions for storing current. And that it will probably have a kind of a hysteresis-like effect with the sun. So, if the sun is heading into grand solar minimum, probably the Earth will lag behind that. Or we may see the opposite effect. Maybe the Earth will start releasing energy that's been stored. But either way, there's going to be some kind of relationship, a time lag relationship between the two. And the storage of current is, I think, underestimated by most people because we tend to focus on capacitance and the storage of charge and just tension overall. But it's just as important.
When you say storage of current, you mean inductance?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly. Yeah.
And yes, they both store energy very well. In fact, that's how switches power supplies work.
Yeah. To go back to the hurricane subject, a hurricane or typhoon, just any of these vortices, is both a large capacitor plate over top of the Earth, and then also it's this inductive machine. It's an engine. And the two are interacting in complex ways that we don't have a perfect model for. And
we don't build spherical homopolar motors. No, that's ridiculous. No one would do that. That's just a big loss waiting to happen. That's just all that energy you could use into transforming it into rotation is now wasted as secondary inductances across the surface, just like you see in the Alfvén model, where you see the currents come in and then there's a reverse inductance in the opposite direction. Well, there must be several of them on these gas giants.
And because we don't do it, we just haven't studied it well enough. And in fact, until very recently, within the last, I'd say 5 to 8 years, we didn't know, but it's cold air which drives the power in a tornado, not hot air. This is an important point.
Actually, Andy could tell you about that.
It's a very important indicator that it's an electrical system because, as we know, cold air tends to increase static charge. Go ahead, Andy.
Oh, I have a model for a supercell thunderstorm. So, you have the rising hot air. You begin with convection currents, but then they develop as they rise up through the layers of moist layers and icy layers of the atmosphere where the clouds form. You get ring currents forming horizontally or parallel to the Earth in those layers that develop dipolar alignments between those points in the clouds and the ground, and so you get in a dipolar alignment that is basically like a positive wire because you've got positive ions floating upwards in that convection current. So what that does is create a electric field in each layer, the ice layer and in the wet layer. And the wet layer is negatively charged. The clouds are like big water drops, and they are going to pull into that central flow of vertical positive flow, right? So they're going to pull to it. So you get the cumulus clouds forming and pulling in around and forming a torus around that alignment of dipolar alignment, and then up in the top of the cloud, in the icy clouds above, you get a dispersion, a diffusion of charge, because you're lifting positive charge and it's meeting a positive layer up in the ice, and so it disperses out into the anvil cloud. The rotation that the torus creates in the center of these dipoles gives them a torque and twists them. And if you take a bunch of straight lines and you twist them in the center, it forms a hyperboloid.
Yes.
And so the basic structure of the mesocyclone is a hyperboloid surrounded by a torus, which is basically the form of a plasmoid. It's the same thing we see in the form of an atom or a galaxy. So, or the star, or the Earth with its geomagnetic field. It's all the same formulation. And so that's basically what a mesocyclone is, in my view. And if you take all the forces and work them together, it all works perfectly to create the coherent feature that we see when you see a great big, flying saucer-shaped mesocyclone.
Neil, since you have Pico's Hank up, I posted a link in the chat.
That's absolutely fascinating.
And skip it to minute 10.
I'll go ahead and find that for you. Yeah, but no, I was just listening to Andy there.
Well, it's going to help him to so as he's talking about it, he'll have imagery for people.
Oh, right here.
Pico's Hank, he's my favorite.
A little further.
Oh, okay.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's plenty here. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, I'm just jumping ahead. Oh yeah, that's a win right there. Okay.
And it's going to continue to build up here, and so okay. Anyways, continue, guys.
So if you look at the structure of the overall mesocyclone, it ultimately will form a wall cloud in the bottom, which is like an inner hyperboloid that's rotating faster, that extends down below the cloud, and that's where the tornadoes form, usually along the edges of that wall cloud. So those are really the dipolar alignments forming up and creating that Markland current, in my view, is how the whole progression goes from mesocyclone to tornado.
I can see why you like this guy. He seems to be very detailed.
Yeah, his guest is that's what he does. So if you go further along, so we don't want to get struck copyright struck on this. So if you go further along, 5 minutes in, I think. Yeah, and there. So the strong draft that is being pulled in is cold air, which is what he professed in this video to actually be surprised about. That's something they had not expected because of the long-standing tradition of
so much energy.
Well, and how they had a kinetic view as to how this all got going, and it's been totally undermined.
Well, and it should be, because obviously there's I mean, this right here is exactly, just in case anyone was debating, when you're looking at astrophysics, this is the exact same problem that astrophysics has as weather has. Right now, a lot of this could be described electrically a lot better. I mean, look at they don't even see this tube as being electric, but to me, it has to be almost like there's no way it's not, right? And
well, yeah, it's got ions and it's flowing. It's a current.
It's a current, right? And so you have these, the same thing happens, but they're using fluid dynamics, which, by the way, very powerful computers doing great work. But that's it's not going to be accurate because you're leaving out the electric field completely. The movement of particles does not tell you exactly
exactly
the
right.
conditions of what's going on.
That's the funny part, is when you're watching this and this guy is talking about it, he is completely leaving out the movement of static charges, which when you have cold air, you really can't avoid the discussion of it. So
I like how you guys keep shooting down my field. It's very welcoming.
Oh,
yeah.
it's
I'm
okay.
sorry. I'm not actually. I'm only pointing at that particular flaw. That's
No. To be honest, I mean, I completely agree. I was just making a joke about the reference, but yeah, I completely understand what you're saying.
I would like to philosophically discuss that. Isn't it interesting that nature does this it's not exactly an efficient looking manner.
Yeah.
I don't know how to express it. It's not clean. Certain parts are really clean, especially the laminar flow, but the turbulent flow seems so inefficient. And I think that that's an important thing to talk about in astrophysics that nobody's really talking about, because the current way that they look at it is so clock driven. It's so by this belief in a regular system that is predictable. And then they go, oh, well, why is SGRA putting out anything? It's supposed to be off. And you're going, well, that's because it's a real system, and real systems are much more interesting and unclean. Whereas we like to produce everything predictable and exactly repeatable. If you get a Mountain Dew can that is, misshapen, you're like, oh, what happened here? How did the machine not make this perfect? But in reality, nature does that. You could almost say on purpose.
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Yeah.
Guys, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on.
You
I
don't?
keep turning off my microphone, and it keeps coming back on as I'm typing in Discord or something. So I'm sorry.
I didn't notice. That's fine. No problem for me.
Well, you noticed when I was coughing.
Questions?
Oh, well, yeah, but I didn't control that. That was back then. That's fine.
Did anyone ask any questions in Discord?
Actually, we got a bunch, but I want to see if there's anybody who can, because we do have some people there, or we did.
The aim. The aim to get people into Discord was get them into the voice chat so that they could come onto the show and be brave and come out to the world and say hello. But they just want to text, I guess.
That's okay.
And we've been talking about various subjects not related to what's been talked about here, but that's okay. Carry on.
Well, I can tell. I'm looking at it now. It keeps going crazy. I look over sometimes and go, okay. Oh, okay. I see what's going on. Some people say, thank you very much.
Well, there's many people joining in the last half an hour, 45 minutes. I think 8 people or 6 or 8 people have joined. So it's a good thing.
I agree.
Well, let's put it to them to, now's a good time to ask questions. We have Andy Hall here, and Panveer's a physicist. Chris, Sean, Egypt stuff. I mean, come on, let's get some questions.
Chris here. I can pull some questions. I got Don Kress in the chat recently. Just says, given Andy's theory of tornadoes, what could be done to guide them away from populated areas, especially trailer parks, which seem to get hit often? Why? Because of grounding? I don't know if that's a question you want to.
It's so funny. That subject came up in Thursday in the clinic. I was joking about that. And my speculation with the patient was that there's some kind of accumulation of charge, and it's almost like the tornado is being attracted to a source. And I suspect that there's probably more truth to that than is comfortable, because I also found a spider that was loving to make a nest off of the truck near the reflector, and there's no way. It's a spider that only makes a web at night, so it's not like there was a constant source of night light in order for it to know that there was bugs that were coming around. So it is somehow sensing that there's reflectivity near to this corner of the truck, and it hides inside the bumper, and then at night it comes out and actually makes the web. So there may be something, to this idea of nature seeking sources of charge. And I don't know how that would work with the tornado. Maybe Neil or Andy have an idea, but I suspect that the trailer parks they're providing thermal energy, and there's something that's drawing them in that direction. Of course, Neil mentioned Dorian going off and finding warm water. We kind of understand how that works. But,
sure.
There's some feature in nature looking for energy sinks. It seems to be the way
or
that
connections.
Works. I don't know all the mechanics about it.
Well, it should attract, a trailer park, with all the metal trailers. I mean, it could act just like a metal antenna draws lightning.
Actually, yeah, they would be metal, plus they'd be connected via the pipes straight to the ground. I mean, you're pumping water from the ground. I mean, you're going to have a metal pipe in there. That's all I meant.
It would be a good place for charge to accumulate and cool on the ground, more so than on an empty parking lot next to it, I would think. So I think that could be that should be an attractor. I mean, what I'm saying is that the whole system is initiated by capacitance between the sky and the earth, so it develops dipolar alignments in those capacitive layers that then concentrate energy, basically, and so those concentrations have to form on the ground. We don't see it, but if you're about to get struck by lightning, your hair may stand on end because you're being charged. Positive charges sweeping to you, and then you're going to attract the lightning, or become part of it. So I think trailer parks could do the same thing with a tornado, because I see the tornado as simply a more diffuse current than a lightning bolt. It's just more diffuse, and they occur over flat land where charge spreads out more, and it can't concentrate as well as like over mountains, which are going to draw lightning and not tornadoes. But I think it's
creating solution.
The same mechanism. Maybe it's just a lower energy plasma that you're dealing with. The lightning bolt goes completely to a 100% plasma channel, but the tornado is a partial plasma channel.
Maybe the solution is one of those Tesla towers being installed every so many dozens of miles and drawing charge to it, and then the tornadoes will be drawn away. I mean, we'll never know unless we try it out.
Well, we've seen the relationship, like the way that tornadoes sort of dance around buildings when they come from the ocean. They try to make landfall. Those type of things where they try to go around them, because I mean, if you think about it, if you're all these pieces of metal are all in a big grid and they're all sort of connected to the water table, so you're connected to wells and the aquifer, and you're a bunch of pipes connected to metal buildings, metal trailers. Wouldn't that just, if you were electrical, wouldn't that just look like a big bunch of charge source just sitting there waiting to be struck? Like, gimme, 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 that's directly connected to water. Yum, yum, yum. Like,
I think most of the time the buildings act as a deterrent for the air masses, but there was a case where went and barreled right at a hospital, and that defied everybody's expectation.
That's true. They don't usually do that.
I think it was Oklahoma City.
Oh.
It might have been Tulsa. I don't remember, honestly, but they made a documentary. In which case, but that was a big glass building, and that might have had something to do with it too.
Yeah, well, glass is a great charge carrier. And metal roofs, that sort of thing could make a difference. There's stories of houses being completely torn apart by a tornado, except there's a table left standing with a glass of water on it, untouched. Things like crazy stories like that. And you wonder, well, maybe a charged envelope would might protect or encapsulate you. And you'd want to be negatively charged, I would think, and because I see positive charges collecting and creating the vortex at the ground level.
I see such a well, there was a strike that happened here, tornado. I wouldn't say even tornado. They said it was like a dust devil, because it only lasted for maybe like 10 seconds. But this guy was by his house. He lived on a hill, and it was just down the road from here, not very far, and we don't get a lot of tornadoes or anything like that. But his metal vehicle was like a trailer you pull along, but it was sitting there on the ground, like, you know, rubber wheels there, but it also had like the metal part was touching the ground, like the chains and stuff. So I can see it was grounded. But he heard just this suddenly a horrible noise. It was clear outside too, just a horrible noise. And he went outside and found that that was 30 feet away, upside down suddenly. Like there's no, and it was a clear sky. Just picked it up and dropped it over there, and of course it's the only piece of metal in the area. Like everything else would have been, you know.
Your story reminds me of something I forgot to share to you guys, which is when I was getting permission to go study the Pratt Thunderbolt strike site in Versailles. The former manager of the property, he relayed a story to me, which was odd. He said that he went out when he managed the property, one day went out and all the horses were walking in figure eights, nose to tail, and they just kept walking in the same figure eight over and over again. And it reminded me of Buddy and the gnats and the cymatics, which I verified, by the way. Just, you know, I'm not going to publish a paper about it, but at the park I camped at last weekend, there were massive numbers of these mayflies that were out, and they most definitely do exactly as Buddy was showing in the video. My wife was delighted by it. In fact, there were some really interesting harmonic. There were different behaviors depending on the depth the sound wave had gone into the field of flies. But anyways, this behavior of the horses. He didn't recall any specific conditions, but he did recall that it was out in one of these craters. And so my speculation would be that they were actually sensing something, and then I don't know if they were compelled or they felt, because animals often will do things to help flow chi. They'll just arrange themselves in those in patterns. So I don't know.
Were they touching each other or just walking?
They were. He didn't say specifically they were touching each other, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were brushing the tail to the nose. But I don't know for sure.
Well, it's just that thought, you see, when
the figure eight was the part that really baffled him, is why a figure eight. And I said, man, I don't have an answer for you.
I honestly can't. I can't tell you either. I do know that it would be very interesting if you were a figure eight. If you were to run a current through it, it would balance magnetically because it would cancel itself out. You would have two charges going in opposite, right? They should cancel. So you should have that. That's nice. So maybe they were trying to do that. But another one would be if they were trying to, if one of them got hit by lightning, they would distribute it amongst themselves and not, wouldn't just instantly that one animal die. I don't know. Just a thought.
Lightning can kill a herd of animals. You know, there's been instances with lightning that's killed as many as 200.
Oh yes,
I forget, reindeer, elk, something like that. You know, a herd.
Siberia happens there quite a bit.
Together on the tundra and get struck.
Oh yes, it's actually it's. I mean, we were just talking about the. This is actually. I'm very happy that you're here, Andy, because Ramon was bringing it to our attention about step voltage in another talk he had there. What was you, Ramon, wasn't it?
Yeah. Actually, not only is that there are some great citations about step potential killing herds of animals and people in that paper, but in the presentation slideshow that I had done for the AKHA and then I shared to you guys, there are citations at the end of that. And in one case, more than 515, I forget, it was sheep or something like that, died in a lightning storm, but I don't know how many strikes it was that killed them, but hundreds and hundreds. There was an entire soccer team that in Africa that accused their other side of voodoo because everybody on their team had been struck dead by a lightning bolt. It's obviously either were playing without shoes or that they had poor insulation in their shoes. Maybe they were wet but the people all thought it was voodoo because
only one team died.
Only one team died. Correct. So
that freaks me out just thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, there's several videos of soccer players being knocked down and some people dying, including a referee, from lightning striking the corner posts or the goal posts. There's like at least 3 videos I can think of on that, and the step potential spreading across the field. And I mean, it's terrible, you know, but and those are insulated, right? They're wearing cleats.
Right. Well, yeah, so, cleats are metal though.
And some of these bolts aren't even very powerful relative to how powerful lightning bolts can get. They range in a factor of about 1,000, 3 orders of magnitude in strength. This was, single stroke, and the effect was pretty immediate. So, of course, compared to that one bolt that tore across the ground in, what was it, Oklahoma in the Dust Bowl era and left the big gash, now that would be a real killer.
I couldn't even imagine, like, some of this stuff. Just where some of the lightning pops out. Like, I've seen tornadoes across dusty fields, smoke, like sort of dust devils appearing, which are very similar, obviously. But
and I need to remind the listener that the distance between the feet is what generates the greater step potential.
Yes.
And because you have the same basic resistance in either situation, the wider your feet are, then the greater the current that flows through your body.
Well, this is what I wanted to talk to Andy about and let him know that this is a direct, very interesting thing that seems to depict the death of very large animals way back when. Because it wouldn't take much for a bunch of woolly mammoths to just, get smoked.
Well, it's interesting. There is a paper that I cite where a mammoth, they found the feet attached in one place in the body and another place, which would seem to indicate that
he jumped right out of his feet.
Well, their body was blasted away.
Yes, clearly.
Yeah, I don't know if it's well, I've heard that some of these cases where where a herd has been killed by a lightning strike, that hooves and antlers are sometimes blown off.
That would not surprise me.
That was a good lightning strike right there.
Yeah, but look at this. Ooh, just comes down top of the house. Poor guys, front yard.
Well, you guys were talking about dust devils, and there's something very interesting about dust devils, and it's also true of water spouts, and they call gustnadoes. Tornadoes, true tornadoes that form in the wall cloud of the mesocyclone. You see the tornado forming in the cloud long before you see anything on the ground, and then they consider it touchdown.
I think that happens. I think it's happened a lot sooner than that. Like it's there in dark mode.
Exactly. And what you see with dust devils is, and I see a lot of them here, where I live, they seem to just sprout from the ground. If you see one form, it's almost like the sand just jumps up into the air and starts spinning. And when they see water spouts form, there's a dark spot on the water that forms before everything starts happening, before the column of air starts swirling. And this dark spot forms, and anyway, it all indicates to sort of an electrode spot being formed on the ground.
Andy, do you think that dark spot is related to the effect Robitaille mentions of water behaving like a black body?
I look at it. Water, is self-ionizing, and it can go with either polarity. So it has dipolar characteristics. So I think it's properties like that. I was reading you know, for example, water has properties that we don't understand. They just learned, a science paper I just read says that water can form spontaneously into hydrogen peroxide if it's formed into an aerosol. So if the droplets get tiny enough, it'll actually shed an oxygen. And then of course so it can form hydrogen peroxide and ions. And then at the other end of the scale, during thunderstorms and especially during tornadoes, ozone is often detected, which would be the byproduct of aerosols forming hydrogen peroxide and ozone. So there's electrical stuff going on that we're not recognizing and not fully cognizant of in thunderstorms, tornadoes, and all that. I think they're 100% electrical creations.
And I think that a lot of people, like we were talking about before in the how there's the material that is in the dusty material doesn't necessarily have to be dusty. Like we were talking about the fact that the ring around the asteroid belt around the sun technically is a bunch of charged particles with negative charges between them, and could constitute a current or a wire, you know, that right. idea. And that's sort of similar to we hear during snowstorms, when it's really dry out, we get what are called snow snakes that are like tubes of snow that go sliding across and rolling down the road, held together.
I have to correct you on one thing there. Sure. Asteroid belts, more than one. I can think of at least 3 large ones, and then there are now several ring systems that they are finding around trans-Newtonian objects. So there are there are lots of these rings. I've posted some images in the papers, and then I did the Haumea ring paper recently. But you don't even have to go that far out. You know, for what Andy's talking about, the fire tornadoes. Now, if it's a thermal, if it's a purely
like
thermal
at Burning Man, actually
situation, well, there was a forest fire that produced a tornado that was strong enough to pull a man out of a truck, and he died because he was pulled right into the fire.
Wow!
If it was purely thermal, then I wouldn't imagine that could work, because in a forest fire, all of the air above the fire should be hot, right? There shouldn't be any really massive cold air gathering at the bottom. So, but we know that fire is a plasma now. We know that now. So it seems to support.
Apparently, so is hay. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about all those loose materials like hay, wool.
Yeah.
They're going to gather static.
And look how this is. I think this is very important that we should study this a bit more, because it's so slow. You can see the parts moving. Like you can see how one moves up and then the other one moves down. It's forming a torus. Watch just one piece as it goes around. It's a figure 8 loop. And you can watch it go around. One side's going up, the other one's going down, and it's going around in a big circle. Each piece, if you just keep your eye on one piece.
How times have changed that 1,000 years ago they would have thought this was witchcraft, and today we're discussing it on YouTube as a science.
Well, they would have thought that was a god or a devil dancing out.
Actually, you got to understand that if and I stress this because there's a lot of people that have a lot of different points of view with regards to religion. But if you look at Julian Jaynes' work, when he was talking about how our brain reacts to stuff like this, when you see something supernatural and you would think of as supernatural, your brain does not cope with that at all very well. And in those instances, this is where these people would see things like instructions from gods that they know are there because their parents know that were there and stuff like that. So, you know, like even if they couldn't see them all the time anymore, they'd still listen to the orders. And that was his argument that I mean, these people would be broken. They would, like, we're watching it here and not freaking out, but if they saw it, like, they would not be able to function. That's how supernatural is, because your brain does not really work that way. Like, we might, it is that sort of thing where people who take drugs, like super psychedelic drugs, are much more changed when you like are, I don't want to say ignorant, but when you're less learned or you have seen less, you know, you can cope with more, you know, having seen things that are probably horrible in your life, and stuff like that, where you haven't broken. This stuff would break people, because it is, like you said. I mean, if you were walking through the field and you were in Joan of Arc's time, yeah, this would be some witch is going to get burnt for this. You know, like,
although I would say, you know, like, just to keep it correct, that even today, like, if you had no context for it and you saw this in the field by yourself, you'd think some shit was going down.
Well, look at that guy, that picture of that guy that looks at the two rainbows and goes, "What does this mean?" And he breaks down and starts crying on the side of a mountain, you know, and his friends are going, "Dude had way too much to drink." I don't really have the time to explain refraction to him, do you? Nope, don't have the time.
He be shrooming. That boy be shrooming.
He must be or something, but
very crunchy people.
Crunchy.
It's not an invalid way of living, and the reason is A, it keeps people very humble. Or die. It's a very keeps people very humble, and keeps them very well connected to source, whatever you want to call source. I don't really care what the name is. And then you know, third thing is, there are a lot of weird things that happen, and this might be quantum effects, or it might just be where by the time people tell you, they've embellished or they've misremembered it or whatever.
Right.
But if you've ever been privy to a situation where weird things are happening, you get very interested. I've shared it on here, the video where the plasma orb flows up and goes past Catherine's hair. Now, I was in that room.
Right.
All right. I'm telling you, there was stuff in that room, and it was not a pleasant feeling to be in. They were very unpleasant things. Now, I couldn't see them. The only way we could see them was with the camera with low light. And later on, when she opened up the footage to put it on YouTube, found the plasma orb going up. So, you know, the weird stuff does happen, and it's not an unreasonable thing to be humble about it. I think the unreasonability is when you turn superstition into dogma, and or use it to get in the way of some kind of progress, like medical.
I must clarify that that I would be one of those people if I was younger. So, like, it is not a matter of. It's not a matter of. It was a matter of explaining. Because we know more, we are less scared, is what I was referring to.
I'm just going to challenge you. Why do you have to be younger? I want to tell you a story here.
Because I was younger at the time.
I was hiking. Yeah, but still, why do you have to be younger? To let me give you the story. So I was hiking at.
Well, I did say less experienced or something like that, but yeah.
And this was, you know, within recent times, like within the last few years, I was down here at the Marks Branch Falls. Now, Marks Branch Falls is a very wild waterfall. There's very dangerous cliffs. And when you're going in, suddenly there were branches down. Now, I was connected into the local forest, what you would say, communing with the forest spirits. Of course, it doesn't mean with words. And I got the feeling that I wasn't wanted, but I went anyways. I went right through the trees, went down in, birds were chirping, and I got the distinct impression, and I've only been to a few waterfalls in Kentucky that are like this, and you get a feeling for different waterfalls, quote, spirits, that they have different opinions about people. And this one did not like me there. And I could not find Gobbler's Arch. Despite the bird telling me where it was, I couldn't find it. I knew generally where it was, but I didn't have time because a thunderstorm suddenly came up. And me having my wife out there and everything, I hiked back up, found her, got us to a rock shelter. Of course, I got poured on. And as we were sitting there, a rolling thunder, just one peal, went rolling by. And so we left. By the time we got out of the trail, the skies were blue. So I was remarking on this to my Taoist Thunder Magic friend who recently put out a new book. If people are interested, it's on Amazon now, called Taoist Morning and Evening Altar Recitations. And one of the practices that they do to acquire the thunder magic is that they go and meditate under a thunderstorm up on Wudong Mountain. And he's
Right.
American.
That sounds
And he told
reasonable.
me straight up. He told me straight up that it was a thunder god, and that it was basically unhappy and was kind of chasing me off. And that's basically the feeling that I got. It doesn't change the science, but it gives context to the actual experience that I actually had.
Well,
and I don't think it's an invalid.
That wasn't an invalid. That's not invalid. That's exactly what you should feel if the place is getting charged. You should be probably not wanted there.
It wasn't doing it before I got there, and it stopped doing it once I left. Like it didn't, I mean, unless I had extraordinarily, ill timing.
Oh,
But
well, I wouldn't have assumed. I would assume that the feeling would come from the charge and you would want to leave, yes, but I wouldn't say it was because of you. If you turned around and went back, I'm sure it was just timing. But,
yeah, well.
But that would be my first opinion. I would have no reason to doubt that.
The air, when you get around one of these waterfall spirits and they don't like you, the air itself is prickly. And I talked to a Hopi grandmother, and she said they call that cactus medicine. The air itself becomes very prickly around you.
That's a very interesting feeling, yeah.
Yeah, and there's another waterfall that did the same thing. And I descended into this valley of this waterfall, and the air was still. It wasn't just prickly. It was like the air didn't move at all. And I had almost caught the place by surprise. Like, why are you here? Because everybody else should be over at Flat Lake Falls. Why was I at McCammon Falls? And it was not a place that it was also a very dangerous and steep place. And the dangerous and steep keeps coming up. It's in feng shui that dangerous, like places of sharp valleys are places of violence where people become violent. And when you look at this is where I finished that paper on the boxing out hypermasculinity, the places with the most hypermasculine or machismo kind of cultures, A, tend to be mountainous, and B, tend to have cultures that have long catastrophic memories. So Greece, Mexico, Japan, Italy, Scandinavia, these are places where they have really strong hypermasculine responses to the catastrophes. And then there's a lot of violence, historical violence, like Japan. I mean, think about, there's no arguing there. Is the island of the gods, huge amounts of violence, really steep mountains, and there's a lot of strange stories, to say the least. I don't know that obviously a lot of them are superstition, but not all of it. That's all. That's my point.
No,
I sort of have a different take on ancient myth and what we call superstition, because I think in ancient times they actually saw much more of the phenomena than we do today. I think they were stronger. I think the electrical environment was quite different. Just think of the Parat symbology carved in rocks, which is, auroras they saw in the sky. So there were things going on that they witnessed and experienced and had to survive. And I think it gave them a better perspective on nature, because they saw nature in its more raw, more extreme form than we do. And we're the ones who are blind to what's going on because of how it's not as extreme as it used to be.
And less frequent in some cases.
And I think we're less prone to ask questions and query it and understand it than they were. And I think there's a whole wealth of knowledge that was trying to be passed on and up to Pythagoreans and so forth. But after that, I think we've moved away from true knowledge and true wisdom that they possessed. And I think if you look at the mythology and the context of what was going on, it makes a lot more sense than the context that we put it in when we look back at it and call it superstition. Because we call it superstition because they're talking about crazy things going on in the atmosphere and dragons and stuff like this that we think is nuts, right? but those things happened. They witnessed dragons, and they
It
witnessed.
might also, to your point, it might also be that suburbanizing and urbanizing in general, where we plow up the ground and change not just the amount of nature that is around, but we take the earth, we pile it up, we move it about. I mean, that's going to alter the effects. It might be.
Well, we live inside walls too. We live inside walls, and much more than they did. And
yeah,
but I think that what I'm saying is that if you look at the mythology and you look at these characters in the King's List or in the from Egypt or the Sumerian texts, the stuff that's put down in the hieroglyphics from very ancient times, they talk about these entities that lived, the kings that lived for hundreds of years, centuries. And I think what they're talking about wasn't physical beings. They were talking about the aurora that they were seeing in the sky. And they were giving them names and describing their moods and describing the danger that they had and describing what was playing out before them. And they were putting context to it, maybe, in terms of their own lives and emotions, but it gave context to what those phenomena were. And if you look at science today, what do you see when you read a science text? You see a bunch of Latinized garbage. You really don't get a context for things because everything is, reductionist view of everything that breaks it all down into little subparts that don't really show a coherent picture. They were looking at a coherent picture and describing the moods and the activities of these entities that were changing their whole lifestyle and affecting the world around them. And I think there's more meaning. We just don't understand it. We're misinterpreting it because we've lost the context that they were talking about.
We also would have lost
the environment itself.
We would have lost the context of other things too. Like one of the things that I often think about is when we go, wow, those people freaked out pretty bad for a thunderstorm, eh? Like you read a story about how bad someone was freaking out because of a thunderstorm. Well, maybe the word thunderstorm has gradually decreased in danger over time. It was a lot worse. Like back when there was like the tornadoes were on fire, like type of thing. Or how much, if you were getting like for example, we talk about, even in my lifetime, the amount of what are they called? Leonid showers, the meteors that come down the meteor shower, is significantly less than it was in my lifetime. And apparently, hundreds of years ago, these things were just filled the sky. Like we're talking hundreds a minute, as opposed to just 1 or 2 a minute. So we might lose context, as Andy said.
If Andy's theory is correct about being giant vortices over the Southwest and presumably other places, then it would definitely be the case.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at Jupiter, that's what we see. That's what we see there. We see an environment that Earth could have had in the past, and I think it did. And I think the evidence is all over the landscape. So that's what I'm trying to write about. But
I think you get no argument from this crew.
It's there.
I mean, we had a great time there.
I could pretend to be a doubter so that we could have a more tension, if you like.
well, I envision that they didn't just see tornadoes; they saw glowing tornadoes, plasma glowing, and dusty, dirty, yes, but also glowing with energized
just like
plasma.
the thunderstorms that have that green glow on the inside. Like these things probably glowed all the time.
Right. Energetic is that, and the thunderstorms themselves were drawing huge, vast quantities of air up from the ground and spitting it out at high altitude, and then it would be recycled back down in cyclones, and that's what we see happening on Jupiter. So we have evidence.
if we're going to work towards creating plasma double layer shields for the Earth. And we better get to work then, because it may not. These conditions of low activity may not be forever. It may just appear to be continuously degrading, but it may just be a lull or the trough of the valley.
They might be coming back.
Well, you look at all those ancient megaliths, and they look a lot like grounding pads of some kind to me.
Well, exactly.
We were talking about that, yeah.
About last week.
Well, actually, I'm talking about because Andy was talking about it there, and then because Andy was talking about it because I mentioned to him way back when. So yeah,
no, yeah, he did.
It was like all this big, but that's fine. I'm not judging. This is why this happens, and this is why it's awesome. But yes,
making the connections.
Yes, exactly. But yes, he mentioned Faraday cage. I didn't think about it as a Faraday cage. I thought of it more of as something that they were using the power for, but not necessarily like a cage. But then he was mentioning they put it around water wells and stuff like that to protect them, perhaps. And that's a brilliant idea, because we do know that sometimes, it is brilliant. The idea that there was diseases that were coming from the heavens too, like that were bad.
See, I think the one thing, Neil, that we can absolutely infer from these megalithic shelters, Faraday cages, if you will, is that this was a condition that was ongoing for a period of time. The skies were filled with energy, and these people could probably get their asses shocked at any moment. They were living in constant fear. They wouldn't have built these giant rock structures that were obviously to hide in if they weren't living in some ongoing.
We called them bunkers the moment we looked at them, and then wondered what they were for. They're bunkers. You just said that instantly.
These things were happening all the time.
Enough that they had to hide.
If there was, for instance, in the solar system, say another planet orbiting around elliptically and coming close to Earth and then far away, or if you're in a linear alignment with Mars and it's bouncing back and forth, you're going to have intermittent and cyclic events that, and that's what I kind of see, is they probably came and went, and dissipated over time and finally disappeared. And then the knowledge was lost, and the true knowledge of what used to happen, the real natural forces, became just wrapped up more in psychology and the stories that evolved from those. But I think you go back to the original stories and the phenomena they talk about, they sound exactly what I would expect to see. Things like glowing whirlwinds.
In that context, even what Newton did was sort of like that Star Wars moment of capturing lightning in a bottle. Like, people were living for 1,000+ years now without direct context of the forces. And suddenly he mentioned something that would have been, gravity would have been incredibly important, shifting gravity in such conditions. And the entire world was like, wow, we'll have some more of that. And we're still stuck, in the gravity well, so to speak. Because it touched on something that was more important in our cultural DNA, in our memory, and especially if you do believe in reincarnation and from life to lifetime, people remembering terrible, terrible events. It's possible. There are some of these dolmens could not be done without some kind of change. And of course, Neil, you've talked about changing the nature of the rock to where it would be soft, but how about to where it could lift? Some of these dolmens,
you're right.
The most common dolmens people show are the ones that look like, okay, well, if they had some really, really advanced Bronze Age cranes, but actually a lot of these dolmens are impossible from modern, in modern conditions for people of the Bronze Age to create. So they must have had advanced techniques, or the conditions were different. And the most likely of those two is that the conditions were very different. And in such a context, gravity would become a really important part of the cultural memory, especially low gravity conditions or strange gravity conditions, maybe specific areas where the gravity was altered. In which case that would kind of explain why people went kind of apeshit for his theory. You know, he did a lot of work, and the one thing that everybody got super hung up on was gravity. You know, he did all this optics work, he did mechanics work, you know, calculus, and you don't find any cults about calculus that I've seen. So why is it that gravity became the force of? Well, because it must be that same effect, again, that Star Wars like effect, where people go to the theater and they see Venus blow up, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen!" You know. They don't know why. They're kids, right? So they just go to the theater and they have that experience. Or they go to Thor Ragnarok and they see the God of Thunder kicking ass, and they just love it to death.
And who doesn't?
And well, who doesn't? And so Newton comes out with this discussion of gravity, and everybody's like, yes, forces. Yes, let's talk about forces. And of course, the stodgier group of people try to keep it all, you know, mechanistic and clockwork. But I don't think Newton would have thought that way at all. I think he would have been very open to the idea that it could alter. That, I mean, G is just a scalar, and it can scale up or down. I mean, that's the whole point of scales. Anybody who works with any kind of audio at all understands. You know, the slider goes this way and the slider goes that way. There's no reason to suspect that it's always going to be exactly the same. Especially, I mean, you know, certain constants might not change, like pi probably never changes. And at the same time, how would you know? Because it's an infinitely irrational number. So how would you ever know?
But this is where I find this, like the idea that like some of the stuff that they've climbed on, that you've seen stairs on, especially Machu Picchu, and then there's this few in I think Bangladesh or India where they're just like rocks, like just giant pillar rocks, and then they built an entire mansion on top of it or something. And the stairwell looks like incredibly treacherous. But if the gravity was less, you're right. The danger of falling becomes less. Like you won't. The chance of you dying is a lot lower if it even at 1/3 gravity. It's very hard to die at 1/3 gravity.
And don't forget that there are motifs of warriors worldwide, not just in China, worldwide, of warriors who knew how to fly. Now, I have a friend who actually can do one of these so-called flying techniques, but it's nothing more than when he jumps really high, he pulls his feet up. It looks like he's flying.
Basketball type maneuver, yeah.
But they're very insistent in all these cultures that people literally were flying. There may have been, you know, and this theme maintains. It was in one of the Thor movies. I think it was Thor 3, but it comes over and over again. People keep referring to changed conditions where over here it feels one way, over there suddenly physics doesn't work. Now, in my opinion, the law of conservation has to hold, and then that includes in cultural ideas. I don't see why that idea should exist unless it had some basis somewhere, that it had some kind of era. And I know that the imagination can do a lot of things.
Well, we don't have to go any further than Icarus and Daedalus to have a good conversation on that. So
exactly.
Also, imagine how easy it would be to make giant megalithic stone buildings if you were at like 1/3 gravity. Ta-da!
Well, then how much energy would you waste on fuel if you didn't have to resist gravity? How big could you get? Because that's one of the big limitations, is once you hit a certain size, like you're about 15 feet tall, you take like 22,000 calories just to sit around and watch TV.
Well,
you know, that's a lot of food.
There's a 9,000 ton stone in China.
I'm starting to feel judged.
In China, that 9,000 ton stone that they suddenly stopped working on, and in Baalbek and in Egypt, there are stones that they suddenly stopped working on. Why did they suddenly stop working on them? I mean, if it was working so well before, did suddenly everybody forget how to use their Bronze Age cranes? I think that something must have changed.
Yes, I think it's very the physical parameters of nature are not as constant as we like to think that they are. And I don't know for sure. It's just you're at that point.
I doubt that the king in China at the time was like, oh, you know what? It turns out I don't think we'll be able to move this. It's too bad we spent so many years working on this giant 9,000-ton stone. I think they fully expected that they would be. They were like, hey, let's see how far we can go with this, and then they got partially through it, and they were like, oh, well, we're not going to be able to finish this one. So they just left it, and it's still there at the Yangshan quarry. I mean, it's 9,000 tons. There's no reason to suspect that I mean, we've never found any metal cranes, and we can't ourselves make there's no crane on Earth at this present state, not a single one, not one that's made an oil rig or anything on this planet that can lift 9,000 tons. Nothing.
Let me jump in here for a sec, because those stones and lifting large stones, if you take into account resonance and this idea of sympathetic resonance, maybe something with the events that happened actually turned objects to
if you didn't know this, man, the Russians have been
Go ahead, Rick. Are you? Oh, I think Rick is talking in Discord, actually. Yeah.
No.
Sorry. Yeah. I was just I was just talking about like this idea of sympathetic resonance using horns to lift stones. There are theories on how large stones were lifted, and it wouldn't mean that, you know, things like gravity weren't different, which I completely think so. But yeah, this idea like Coral Castle, like tuning stones to a certain frequency, basically induces anti-gravitic properties. Right.
Yeah, but the problem is we have video now from Coral Castle of him using electrical machines and tripods to lift that. I mean, I have those videos stored if anybody wants them. I've never seen it ever work out. I mean, I'm open to the idea, but 9,000 tons is a little bit big for a tuning fork, don't you think?
No, I just mean I could link here, but there are these pictures or drawings of these monks using 100-foot horns focused on a single beam, on a single rock. And essentially you induce a certain type of flow in the charge in the rock. And just the same way Neil was talking about rocks, like the Hutchinson effect now. There's this type of thing where rocks are made of tiny dipoles, right? If you induce a certain type of flow in these dipoles, would you potentially create a different type of physical attribute? I'm hypothesizing, but I'm just saying there are ideas about this.
I've been thinking about that for a while, but again, I always run up to the point where you're like, okay, if you can do this, then we should have accidental versions of this happening occasionally, and we don't. Or maybe it's something that they could do then, but not now. Or maybe
there are examples of the Tibetans using, but I've just never seen them doing anything remotely close to 9,000 tons. That's my point there. I mean,
I hear you completely. Yeah, I mean, I've actually been. Yeah, I've been to Baalbek, and I think it's like completely done by progenitor type, 10-foot tall, 12-foot tall people. There are thousands of columns that couldn't possibly have been lifted by today's
and there's
standards.
Like only made of 3 pieces or something, like that's it.
Well, and those ones are only 1,000 tons each.
Only.
You know, I mean, 900 to 1,000 tons. Yeah, I mean, well, but that's a huge difference to 9,000 tons.
No,
I mean, that
particular.
I mean, what you know what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? Like,
no, I do.
Like, why would you start a pyramid if you don't think you could finish it?
However, I heard something about the way that particular quarry was done. There was an argument that it was truly ancient, and smooth, like the ones in Japan, but the emperor got his dudes to go and put that little chisel marks in it, and just chisel off the top of it and claim it for himself, and say that it was him that was doing it. But
do you mean the one in Japan underwater? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm not talking about Yonaguni. I'm talking about the ones that are above the ground, but they look similar to Yonaguni. But I was referring to this particular quarry that has that 9,000-ton stone. If I'm not mistaken, every single piece is cut with this chisel mark. It's like someone just went over everything and put chisel marks on everything. I thought that was an interesting observation. as opposed.
Yeah,
to...
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that is a pretty standard practice in the old days. A lot of the pyramids look to be like they may have been Sumerian style ziggurats that were then covered over and made into step pyramids, which were then covered over with a bigger pyramid, which was then encased.
And then occasionally you accidentally build a cathedral on top of a pyramid and don't realize you did that, like the guys in Mexico.
I think that they knew that they were doing that, but
you think? Oh, okay.
I think so. But I have no doubt that people back then, they may have had different terms, but if you could put it into Google Translate, that Andy Hall is correct, that they knew more about intuitively in their daily lives. And that's not hard considering how many kids out there don't know that pizza isn't a vegetable. I mean, it's going to happen that it's not.
No,
there are people now that don't know how to fold clothes. So it's not that actually hard for people in the old days.
Oh, I'm putting my hand down now.
Understanding, you know?
Yeah, but we have a whole bunch of people on this Skype. I kind of try and play the devil's advocate here. We do have 40 people watching and people on Skype. We're actually talking about high level concepts. It's not nothing, right? I mean, so yeah, some people don't know that ketchup is not a vegetable, but like we still we still have some hope for humanity, right?
Well,
just a little bit.
Okay, let's everything's working out great here, guys. Let's wrap it up though, because we have. Is there any further questions that we can grab from our audience? Because I want to really answer a few more. It was just happy to see Andy pop in, and a few others pop in here. Tim, although he can't talk, I know it's good to have you here too. But do we have any? Perhaps Rick, do you happen to have someone or something?
Well, there was a question about DARPA and weather manipulation, but we know that, if sorry, we know that was my phone.
Oh, okay.
At Darth Vader is my notifications. Anyways, we understand that, energy comes from the sun, affects our weather. So, and DARPA is pumping massive amounts of energy into the
I think you mean HARP, but yeah.
Well, HARP, yeah. Well, HARP is part of DARPA, isn't it?
Well, yes, but the Defense Association, blah, 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 research, blah, 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 is just like a big thing. I don't know what it really means.
What's the question?
Yeah, what's the question?
Well, the question was, have they manipulated our weather? Is there any evidence of it?
God, that's a really good question. We know that they used to during war times in the past, and there's some...
There is... before you go too far, there is a Curious Droid or Cold Fusion, I forget which channel, has a video on. I'm pretty sure it's Curious Droid. He's very reliable. If people want to pull up his explanation of the power of HARP, it's not actually what most people are thinking. So I would definitely recommend. He goes through the math on that. Okay, go ahead.
I'll quickly add a quick thought on that. Eric Dollard also says it's supposed to be like an energy device that they're actually trying to gain energy and store energy versus trying to mess with weather. But that's just a thought.
That's actually pretty cool. I never thought of that. Any more, Rick?
I'm looking through chat.
Not that I can. I mean, I've been watching people come in. I've been talking to them about certain things. It's just wasn't related to what we were talking about. So no, I think that was about it. Unless somebody can quickly type in a question.
No, I just didn't want to make sure that I wasn't ignoring people. That's kind of like the most.
Yeah,
important
I understand.
thing.
I understand.
No,
I was keeping them busy. Sorry, in Discord
and
answering their questions as best I could.
I would bring up one thing about, again, back to the hurricanes for a second, because the whole Nuka hurricane thing came up.
Yes.
And a surprising number of people dismissed it. And I was like, oh, now hold on a second. So if people go and watch the Curious Droid his video on the experiments the Soviets and the United States did, where they were detonating nukes in space and creating electric currents.
Yes, I love those.
Relevant to people. Please go watch and subscribe to Curious Droid. Cold Fusion's not a bad channel either. And if you like planets and stuff, Astrum is not a bad channel. It's very stat-filled.
And if you want to watch planets and moons live, TakeBackSpace is an awesome channel.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? There was I wanted to show a link, but I can't find it. Sorry. So keep going. I didn't find anybody in the chat asking questions, but a lot of great comments. So.
Oh, that's good. Sorry, I'm just now interested in watching the starfish go off. Forming a double layer.
Operation Fishbowl. Fishbowl 2.
All right, fellas. Well, I'm gonna head on out.
I think we're good here. Yes, I'm gonna actually just do something, and I'm gonna let us. If I do this right, okay. I'm just everyone no talk, and I'm just gonna actually hit the little button, and we're all going to sort of slide away into, and I'm going to like let us go. So, and then we can talk here in Skype afterwards, but I'll let the show go. So thank you everyone for listening, because I'm very happy that you were here, and I'm very happy to have answered as many questions as we got to. And I hope that we have the opportunity to have Andy on again. It was very nice for you just to suddenly drop by. So thanks. And again, Tim and everyone else who's managed to join us. It's good to see such a large family, I guess you could say.
Hey, thanks, Neil. I'll try to drop by more often. It was fun.
Oh, I love it. I love having you here too. So take care, my friends. I'm just going to hit the little button and do the transfer out here. So.